Chapter 73. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he was greeted by a burly man with bell-like eyes and short stubble. He grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder and asked, "Are you Rinpoche?" Rinpoche nodded. "I will depend on you in the future." The burly man grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and shook him back and forth. For some reason, Rinpoche felt that these words were like a dying wish. Then the burly man laughed out loud. "I finally don't have to deal with those bastards. I want to pinch them to death every time." Looking at his ecstatic expression, it was as if he had been sentenced to at least 3 years and was suddenly released. Rinpoche looked at him with bright eyes. Needless to say, this was the former Honglu deputy, the one who broke the legs of 4 people and was reported. Rinpoche was curious. Was it so painful to deal with foreigners in the Honglu bureau? That burly man laughed wildly for a long time before patting Rinpoche's shoulder and saying, "Boss Gu is waiting for you at the back. Turn right from here to the biggest house." Then he threw his head back and laughed out loud. Rinpoche followed the direction he pointed and passed through the first row of buildings. There was a row of slightly shorter buildings at the back, and the door of the largest building on the right was open. "Sir Gu." Rinpoche got the 2 of them to stay where they were and shouted as he walked to the door. Gu Daxiong was sitting behind a desk. The desk was empty except for 2 big feet. It was different from an ordinary office. There was nothing on the desk. "Come in." Gu Daxiong raised his head and waved at Rinpoche. "Did you see Qiji? You should have met him before." Rinpoche felt that they were talking about the burly man from just now. "Yes, he ran away. From now on, you will be in charge until the group of people leave after His Majesty's birthday celebration. All I ask is that they don't bother me, and you can do whatever you want. If you don't like him, just beat him up. Just don't kill him." Gu Daxiong casually threw a token on the table. Rinpoche was speechless as he took the token. "Go find Gu Shou and get a set of official robes to alter first. If you see that there's nothing to do in the courtyard, take away the servants and use them. Just one thing, don't let them bother me." Gu Daxiong grinned and reiterated. Rinpoche could only nod. It seemed like he was really throwing everything to him this time. The officials of Dayo were indeed different from the flirtatious and cheap people of other places. "Sir Gu, when exactly is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? How much longer until then?" Rinpoche cupped his hands and asked. "There are still 22 days left." He reckoned that someone would come in the next 2 days. Some of them will stay in the residences of the envoys from other countries, while others will be arranged by them. The rest will be up to you. "Where are they arranged?" Rinpoche asked again. "There had to be a place for them to be arranged. Find Gu Shou, he will tell you where to go," Gu Daxiong said. "If anything happens to them, or if there's any trouble, if they deserve to be beaten, then beat them up. They were the ones who insisted on coming over. No one begged them to come over." Gu Daxiong interrupted Rinpoche. When Rinpoche saw this, he felt that it was better to wait and see. "Sir Gu, one last question. What if the opponent is an expert?" "With my skills, I can't beat anyone," Rinpoche finally asked. "If he was beaten up by someone else, he would definitely be buried by the Empress." Gu Daxiong looked at Rinpoche suspiciously. Even though Rinpoche's physique was a little thin and weak, and he didn't look like he could fight, but Her Majesty actually arranged for a weakling to come over? In any case, Rinpoche was the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, and that old lady was very powerful. "Wait." After finishing his sentence, Gu Daxiong stood up and walked towards the door. When he passed by Rinpoche, he swung his arm and almost flipped Rinpoche over. "Why don't you have any strength at all?" Gu Daxiong turned his head and looked at Rinpoche doubtfully. Rinpoche was pushed back a few steps. Looking at Gu Daxiong's innocent and doubtful face, he could only sigh. Gu Daxiong walked to the door and shouted, "Xiong Pai, get your ass over here." This shout was really earth-shattering, and the Honglu Bureau was immediately thrown into chaos. "Boss, he's here, he's here." A loud voice came from afar. When the person appeared at the door, Rinpoche immediately felt as if a wall had suddenly appeared in front of the door. Even half of the light outside the door was blocked, and the room became dark in an instant. The person who appeared at the door was a burly man who was more than 2 meters tall. He was bald, bare-chested, and wore a pair of cloth pants. His entire body was bulging with muscles, and there were many scratches on his body that looked like those left by wild beasts. Gu Daxiong's physique was like that of a bear, but the person outside was taller and stronger than him. Xiong Pai were the largest of their kind, and the person at the door really lived up to his name. Compared to him, Caretaker sure was not much stronger than a chicken. Xiong Pai, this is the newly appointed deputy. You will follow him for the next few days, and beat up whoever he tells you to beat up. Oh, greetings, deputy. Su Dali cupped his hands towards Renbaqian. His voice was a little muffled, and he seemed a little silly. Renbaqian walked to Gu Daxiong's side, and compared the difference in their physiques. Gu Daxiong's arms were almost as thick as his waist. Just by standing there, he was like King Kong, giving people a huge sense of oppression. Especially when looking at the scars on his body from such a close distance. Renbaqian felt that his entire body was emitting a fierce aura. If a hatchet man was to be graded based on his appearance, Renbaqian felt that he could be given a score of 9. He gave off 1 mark because he was afraid that Xiong Pai would become arrogant. As long as his strength is not at the heaven rank, no one can defeat him. Gu Daxiong hammered his chest twice, producing a thumping sound. Xiong Pai revealed a simple and honest smile, and there were still shreds of meat in the gaps between his teeth. Was heaven rank the division of strength in this world? Renbaqian did not know whether it was heaven rank, man rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, or upwards ho. In any case, heaven rank should be very powerful, and he did not know what rank the Empress was at. Renbaqian cupped his hands and thanked. Thank you, Sir Gu. It's all right. Looking at your small physique, he will follow you for the next few days. Gu Daxiong waved his hands. Then where should I look for Gu Shou? The house at the very end. Gu Daxiong pointed to the left side of the main door. Thank you, then I will take my leave. Renbaqian walked out of the door, and Xiong Pai followed him. Renbaqian turned his head and looked at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai was much taller than him, and he had to raise his head to look at Xiong Pai's face. When Xiong Pai walked, Renbaqian could feel the tremors under his feet. I will have to take care of you for the next few days. Everyone has to complete the tasks given by the higher-ups, Renbaqian said to Xiong Pai. Deputy, I will beat up whoever you tell me to. Xiong Pai grinned and gave a simple and honest smile. Yes, it sounded crude, but the logic was not crude. That was exactly what he meant. Renbaqian nodded his head in satisfaction, and went to the room at the very end to look for Gu Shou. After entering, he realized that Gu Daxiong was 1 size smaller. Even his actions were exactly the same. He was sitting on a chair, and both his legs were directly placed on the table. Chapter 74. Gu Shou threw an official robe to Renbaqian. If it was worn by someone else, it might be just right or slightly loose, but if it was worn by Renbaqian, it would be unsightly. He held it in his hands and prepared to find a tailor shop to change it. Originally, Tung Hulu and Tai Dao were his 2 bodyguards. Now with Xiong Pai, they were nothing. Standing in front of Xiong Pai, one would have to look up to him. Although Tung Hulu and Tai Dao were not small, they were only about 1.75 meters tall, similar to Renbaqian. It was just that their bodies were much more muscular, and weighed at least 100 kilograms. But compared to Xiong Pai, they were as thin and weak as chicks. Renbaqian pressed on Xiong Pai's arm. It was as if it was made of steel. Sir Ren, this is? The 2 asked. This is Xiong Pai. You will be following me for the next few days. Both of you can go back first, Renbaqian said. Deal with those animal hides as soon as possible. I still need them. The 2 nodded their heads. They were originally from the Beast Park. They followed Renbaqian every day, because it was easy for something to happen when Renbaqian went out alone. With Xiong Pai by his side, the 2 of them had nothing to worry about. What do you usually do in the division? Renbaqian asked Xiong Pai after the 2 of them left. Drink, sleep, and practice martial arts. Xiong Pai grinned. Practice martial arts? What do you practice? Renbaqian asked with interest. Deputy, you will know when you come. Xiong Pai led Renbaqian around the row of houses. There was a field at the back. At this moment there were 5 or 6 people there. A few of them were practicing martial arts. Their movements were very fast and powerful. There was also someone lifting a stone block. It was the kind that weighed 100 kilograms. He raised it horizontally and put it down again and again. When Renbachian arrived, he saw that the other party was sweating profusely. He had done more than 30 stone blocks in a row and was still the same. Renbachian did not know how many stone blocks he had done. What do you usually do? Renbachian asked. He was curious about Xiongpai's strength. After all, there were not many people with such a physique in Dayo. Although physique did not represent strength, Gu Daxiong had specially asked Xiongpai to follow him. Presumably, Xiongpai's strength was top-notch. My lord, please watch from the side, lest you get hurt. Xiongpai grinned and walked to the side. There was a big stone that was 1 meter square. He directly hugged it with both hands and shouted loudly. He lifted the huge stone up to his eyebrows and slowly put it down. Then he raised it again and put it down again. Renbachian, who was standing at the side, opened his mouth and was almost stunned by him. One had to know that a 1 meter square stone weighed 2 to 3 tons. And he lifted it just like that? Moreover, he raised and lowered it several times. Finally, with a loud shout, he directly threw the stone over his head, throwing it 2 to 3 meters high. Damn. Renbachian couldn't help but speak. If it landed like that, an ordinary person would have been smashed into a meat patty. It would be easier for Renbachian to accept if he were to toss 200 to 150 kilograms into the air. But this was 2 to 3 tons, almost the weight of a car. Xiongpai, on the other hand, caught it calmly and steadily. He only pressed his legs down a little to cushion the impact. Then he threw the stone up again and caught it again. When Xiongpai threw the stone for fun, the other player couldn't play anymore. He got a stone that weighed 100 or 200 kilograms, but Xiongpai got a stone that was 20 times the size. How could he play? It was embarrassing. All right, stop. Renbachian hurriedly shouted. Looking at Xiongpai's training movements made him a little dizzy. His heart was trembling and he always felt that if he missed, a freshly made pizza would appear in front of him. If Xiongpai were to dye his entire body green, he could become the Hulk. Wouldn't it attract suspicion? Upon hearing Renbachian's shout, Xiongpai immediately turned around and walked away. He didn't even catch the stone and smashed it on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble. Let's go and change your official uniform first. Renbachian looked at Xiongpai in front of him. Even after throwing a 2 to 3 ton stone a few times, he didn't even break a sweat. After bringing Xiongpai out, Renbachian felt that he didn't have to worry about being hit by people when he walked. With such a guy behind him, no one would be blind enough to bump into him. Xiongpai's physique was rather terrifying for the people of Dayo. He was the kind that would attract sidelong glances wherever he went. Julian district basically had more yamen offices and very few residences and shops. Renbachian directly brought Xiongpai to Gujiazhai district. There were more residences there, and it should be easier to find a shop for changing clothes. Just as he entered the main street of Gujiazhai, he saw a shaved ice shop at the side. There were many people sitting inside, and they were all there to avoid the summer heat and eat shaved ice. This was still in the morning. If it was in the afternoon, there would be more people. Qingshan. Renbachian went in and shouted, "Sai sir, run." Sir Qingshan raised his head and shouted. The dust on the roof beam kept falling. Lower your voice, don't be so loud. Renbachian rubbed his ears and said, "Give me 2 bowls of shaved ice, any fruit." Then he found an empty table and sat down. "Sit here." Renbachian patted the stool beside him. Xiongpai shook his head and said, "I'd better not sit." "Sit, I said so." Renbachian insisted. There was no reason for him to stand while he was sitting. He still needed his protection from now on. Seeing that Renbachian insisted, Xiongpai slowly sat down. Crack. The long stool immediately broke. Xiongpai got into a horse stance, stood up, and scratched his head. "I'd better stand." Renbachian was speechless. It seemed like Xiongpai had broken 1 or 2 stools from sitting, and was already experienced. Looking at Xiongpai's physique, Renbachian called out to Sir Qingshan, "Give me another bowl of shaved ice." When the 3 bowls of shaved ice were served, Renbaqian picked the color that suited him the best and pushed the other 2 bowls to Xiong Pai. This is for you. Don't eat too quickly. Along the way, he felt that Xiong Pai was a little silly and was somewhat similar to Tongjia. Renbaqian was only halfway through his meal when he looked up and saw that Xiong Pai had already finished 2 bowls. He was still licking his lips and had a satisfied look on his face. This is cooling. Xiong Pai laughed foolishly. Renbaqian quickly finished his bowl and looked up to call out to Shi Qingshan. Qingshan, where do you find clothes changing? Walk 300 steps forward, and there will be one in the alley next to it. Let's go. Renbaqian called out and brought Xiong Pai to the location that Shi Qingshan pointed out. Indeed, they saw an alley that turned right. It was only 2 meters wide, and there were wooden houses at the side. After walking for a while, they didn't see a single signboard. Brother, can I ask where the clothes-changing shop is? Renbaqian called out to a burly man who had just come out of the house to pour some water. You have walked past it. That's the one. That man took a glance at Renbaqian, and then looked at Xiong Pai, who was behind him. He stretched out his hand and pointed. Renbaqian turned around and saw that the man was pointing at the 3rd door at the entrance of the alley. Thanks, brother. Renbaqian laughed, turned around, and entered the house with Xiong Pai. Chapter 75. Renbaqian stayed in the Honglu Bureau for 2 days and more or less understood the people and rules there. During this period, he found out that Xiong Pai lived in a courtyard not far from the Honglu Bureau. Those outsiders were usually arranged to stay there. Xiong Pai loitered around the courtyard and could definitely play a role in stabilizing the situation. During this period, Renbaqian made a trip back to Earth. When he came back, he took 300 song poems and sat in the Honglu Bureau. When he had nothing to do, he would recite song poems. At least, he had nothing to do and was still in a state of idleness. Xiong Pai followed Renbaqian wherever he went. When Renbaqian was reciting song poems, Xiong Pai would immediately sit on the ground and start snoring. Renbaqian wished he could stuff socks into Xiong Pai's mouth. Deputy, someone's here. On the afternoon of his first day back from Earth, Renbaqian was pondering how to stuff Xiong Pai's mouth when a loud voice came from outside. Who's that? Renbaqian couldn't react for a moment. He said he's called Mr. Emptiness. The person who came in was one of the guards at the entrance. His name was Qisheng. He came from the same village as the original deputy Qiji. There was another guard called Qi Heng who was also at the entrance. Mr. Emptiness? Renbaqian immediately reacted. These were the people who came to celebrate the Empress's birthday. Xiong Pai, get up and follow me to take a look. Renbaqian kicked Xiong Pai's waist twice. It felt like he was kicking a rock. He brought the sleepy Xiong Pai to the entrance and saw 4 pretty young ladies in colorful clothes carrying a palanquin. When the 4 ladies saw him, they grabbed a handful of flower petals from their waist pockets and scattered them into the sky. Who's coming? Renbaqian stood at the entrance and looked at this scene. He had a bad premonition. Mr. Emptiness has arrived. The young lady in front shouted delicately and scattered another handful of flower petals. Please follow me in to register. Leave the palanquin outside. Renbaqian looked at her awkwardly. What was she trying to do? Cough, cough. A series of coughing sounds came from within the palanquin. Soon after, the curtain was lifted, and a young man wearing a silver silk robe walked out. His face was covered with a layer of powder, and his lips were green. His appearance was passable, but this sickly posture that seemed like it would be blown away by a gust of wind was no longer just a sign of emptiness. It was clearly a sign of kidney deficiency. Young master kidney deficiency, right? Follow me. With his hands behind his back, Renbaqian turned around and walked in expressionlessly. Cough, cough. It's young master emptiness, young master emptiness. Young master emptiness quickly explained. I'm just joking, Mr. Emptiness. Renbaqian didn't even turn his head. Cough, cough, cough. Mr. Emptiness coughed again. A strange look flashed across his eyes. However, when he saw that Xiong Pai was staring at him expressionlessly, the strange look in his eyes gradually disappeared. He coughed and followed behind Xiong Pai. Do you have a travel pass? Renbaqian asked. I lost it. Foreigners who came to Dayo would definitely need a travel permit from the border. Needless to say, there was no such thing. Thinking about it, it made sense. The people who came to the Empress's birthday celebration had all kinds of backgrounds. There was no guarantee that some of them would simply ignore the law. This kind of thing happened quite often in previous years. Renbachian had also heard about it 2 days ago. Renbachian brought Mr. Emptiness back to the deputy's room. He immediately took out a pen and paper from the shelf at the side and placed them on the table. Name, birthplace, origin, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Please write down all these. If you are here to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday, it will be sent to Her Majesty. Renbachian sat behind the table after he finished speaking. Cough cough, how should I address you? Mr. Emptiness covered his mouth and asked. Honglu Deputy, my surname is Run, Renbachian said indifferently. Mr. Emptiness stood in front of the table and wrote something on the paper, following which, with a flick of his wrist, the paper turned into a white shadow and flew towards Renbachian's chest. Bang! Before the paper could fly past the table, it was pressed down by a big hand. In the next moment, the entire table was smashed into pieces by his palm. Xiongpai crushed the table with one hand and stared fixedly at Mr. Emptiness. He gave off the feeling that he was a wild beast that was ready to pounce. Mr. Emptiness had no doubt that as long as Renbachian opened his mouth, this beast-like burly man would immediately pounce on him. The feeling that this burly man gave him was that he was extremely dangerous. Renbachian's expression did not change, but his palms were a little sweaty. A surge of anger was rising in his chest. The people in this world would really start a fight whenever there was a disagreement. He originally thought that only the Aboriginals were like this. It seemed that the people from other countries were not any better. Of course, this Mr. Emptiness was definitely not an ordinary person. Attacking a deputy. Do you think I should kill you or bury you? Renbachian looked straight at him and sneered. Sorry, I just threw it casually. If he did not make a move, it would have slowed down when it reached the deputy. Even an ordinary person could easily catch it. I did not expect this to cause such a misunderstanding. Cough cough. Mr. Emptiness revealed an apologetic smile. If anything happens again, you will be buried under Lawn City, Renbachian continued coldly. You damaged a table, a piece of Honglu Bureau's special paper, and a compensation of 100 taels of silver. Mr. Emptiness took out a few golden leaves from his waist and lightly threw them to Xiongpai. Or rather, they should be called golden leaves. They were like books with 10 pages and could be taken apart for use. I don't have a place to stay. I'm afraid I will have to trouble you to arrange it for me, Mr. Emptiness said. Renbachian rummaged through the ground. That piece of paper was only left with fragments. Before that, I have to fill it in again. Renbachian stood up and found another piece of paper from the cabinet beside him. This time, Mr. Emptiness could only place the paper on the wall and write. He coughed a few times while writing. Renbachian felt that there seemed to be some problems with his lungs. He did not know if it was because of his training or because of this. I have finished writing. Mr. Emptiness passed the paper to Renbachian. Renbachian glanced at it. This Mr. Emptiness's surname was Zhao. He could recognize 2 words from his name, but there was one that he did not recognize. He was from Great Xia's XX Zhao family. He also did not recognize the name of the place. He placed the paper on a shelf and pressed a piece of wood on it. I will bring you to the place where you will stay. Renbachian walked in front with Xiongpai. Mr. Emptiness left the Honglu Bureau and got on a sedan chair and followed behind. After walking for a short distance, they arrived at a courtyard. They were all individual courtyards, and each courtyard had 4 rooms. One of them was the kitchen, one was the master bedroom, and the other 2 were for the attendants. The courtyard was divided into 3 rows. The first row faced the main street, and Renbachian arranged for Mr. Emptiness to stay there. He was the first to arrive, so naturally the place was the best. Mr. Emptiness was satisfied with this position. After getting off the sedan chair, he cupped his hands and thanked Renbachian. In a while, someone will send you a sign to prove that you are staying in this courtyard, Renbachian said to him. You can make your own arrangements. There are bedding and whatnot inside. Cough cough, thank you very much, Deputy Ren. Mr. Emptiness coughed violently after finishing his sentence. The handkerchief covering his mouth was dyed red. I shall not disturb you any more. Ren Baqian saw that he was coughing up blood and hurriedly left. Could it be that he was suffering from tuberculosis? It was better to stay away from him. After leaving the courtyard, Ren Baqian turned back to take a look. It was the Empress's birthday celebration. Why did a sickly person like him come all the way here? But these people were really ruthless. If he did not have Xiong Pai by his side to protect him, he would have been in trouble. What did he mean by slowing down when he was in front of him? Who was he trying to fool? To be able to throw a piece of soft paper like a dart, what kind of technique did he have? This was only the first person, and he did not know what kind of people would come after him. He was afraid that this task would be more troublesome than what he had originally thought. If there were many of these people, it would be difficult to deal with them without using force to suppress them. Chapter 76. Ren Baqian strolled back with Xiong Pai. He deeply felt that this job might not be as easy as he had previously thought. Just the fact that Mr. Emptiness's palanquin was carried by the 4 young ladies who were able to carry the palanquin all the way to Lan City showed that they were definitely not ordinary people. He fiddled with the golden page in his hand. It really looked like a pocket-sized golden book. Taking a closer look, he realized that there were words carved on each page. It was a pity that he couldn't understand what was written. Just as he returned to the entrance of the Honglu Bureau, he saw a young man wearing a dirty robe and carrying a book on his back. He was talking to Qi Heng and Qi Sheng. It was the kind that Ning Kaichen carried in a Chinese ghost story. It was used to store the 4 books and 5 classics. There was a piece protruding from the top to block the sun during the day, and also to block the rain during the rain. No one knew what they were talking about, but Qi Sheng suddenly took a step forward, scaring the young man so much that he almost fell to the ground. What's going on? Ren Baqian asked as he approached. Deputy. Both of them turned around and greeted him with cupped hands. This is. He said he came to celebrate His Majesty's birthday, Qi Heng said. Ren Baqian sized him up. That young man was about 16 or 17 years old, and had a tender face. Ren Baqian didn't know what kind of family would actually allow him to cross the border and come to Dayo. His body was a little dirty. He didn't know how long it had been since he last bathed. His robe was covered in dust. Are you the deputy here? The young man asked curiously. Ren Baqian nodded. I am. What, you don't look like one? The young man nodded honestly. It doesn't look like it. You will be beaten for being so honest. Ren Baqian looked at him from the corner of his eyes. I'm sorry. I meant that you don't look like someone from Dayo. The young man quickly said. You came by yourself? Yes, the young man said. Come in with me and register yourself. Ren Baqian waved his hand and walked into the courtyard with his hands behind his back. How should I address you? Ren Baqian asked casually. Surname Ning, given name Kaichen. Ning Kaichen. Ren Baqian suddenly turned his head to look at Ning Kaichen. His neck almost turned 180 degrees, scaring Ning Kaichen, who was behind him. Sir, it's Ning Kaichen, what's wrong? Is Xiaoqian doing well? Ren Baqian put on a fake smile and didn't know what to think. I've just met young Master Kidney Deficiency, and now there's Ning Kaichen. This world is really a coincidence, and it's a small one. Who is Little Qian? Ning Kaichen was at a loss. Perhaps you will meet them in the future, Ren Baqian said. When he returned to the room, it was still a mess. The broken table lay on the floor, and there were many broken pieces scattered around. Fill in this form. Name, place of origin, background, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Ren Baqian passed the paper to him and pointed to the windowsill. It didn't take long for Ren Baqian to receive the paper from Ning Kaichen. He scanned through the paper and saw that it was from Great Xia. After putting the paper away, she brought him to his residence. Along the way, Ren Baqian inquired about the happenings along the way. He was very curious about everything in the outside world. At the mention of this, Ning Kaichen couldn't stop talking. He was in high spirits as he recounted his experiences. Along the way, he described it as though Tang Sung went on a pilgrimage for 81 hardships. Sir, there's something you don't know. One day, I was camping in the deep mountains. A huge bird covered the sky and covered the sun. When it flapped its wings, it almost blew me off the mountain. Later on, I hugged an old tree that was hundreds of years old and saved my life. At that time, my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I didn't expect such an exaggerated thing to exist in this world. It was really an eye-opener. When I return, I will definitely draw this thing and let the world know about it. Another time, I was camping in an ancient temple. In the middle of the night, a young lady suddenly came to seek shelter. She said that she missed the right time to travel in the mountains. I shared half of my rations with her. Later on, she said that she wanted me to rest at her house for a day to thank her. At that time, I thought that I was indeed a little tired from traveling for a few days. Since her house wasn't far away, I thought of going to her house to rest for a day. Later on, when I woke up, there wasn't any luxurious house. Instead, there was an ancient tomb around it. Another time, I met a group of robbers. When they saw that I had nothing on me, they kidnapped me and brought me to the mountain. The king of the mountain was actually a woman. She was 16 years old, unmarried, and as beautiful as a flower. When they saw that I was a scholar and that I was fair, they wanted to marry me. Later on, I pretended to agree and ran away while they were preparing for the wedding banquet. Now that I think about it, it's really sad. Ren Baqian was dumbfounded by Ning Kaichen's bluff. He had to admit that Ning Kaichen was more suitable for storytelling than him. Even though Ning Kaichen looked immature and weak, he was a veteran in bragging. Ren Baqian felt that if he didn't have such outstanding bragging skills, he might not have been able to arrive at Lan City unscathed. It was a short journey from the Honglu Bureau to his residence. At the very least, Ren Baqian felt that he couldn't bear not to take care of him after listening to his words, and the hardships he went through along the way. He didn't even want the beautiful female king of the 28 mountain village just to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. This kind intention was really touching. Ren Baqian brought him to his residence. It was a courtyard that was connected to Mr. Emptiness's. You can stay here for the time being, Ren Baqian said. Thank you very much, Deputy. I can't thank you enough, Ning Kaichen said. He felt a little regretful that he couldn't continue to brag. I'm just doing my job. If there's anything, you can look for me at the Honglu Bureau. If I'm not around, look for someone else, Ren Baqian instructed. After all, he didn't look like he was very good at fighting. Of course, this was hard to say. After all, he had traveled a long way to get here. Bragging skills alone might not always be useful. This Ning Kaichen might be an expert in disguising himself as a pig to eat a tiger. Ren Baqian waved his hand at Ning Kaichen and brought Xiong Pai back. When he passed by the courtyard where Mr. Emptiness lived, he took a glance inside. The sedan chair was still there, but he didn't see the 4 women who were carrying it. They should be in the house. After returning to the Honglu Bureau, he didn't encounter anything else. He sat there and recited the song Xiai until the sky turned dark. When he estimated that it was about time, he sent Xiong Pai back and strolled to the Chun medicine shop alone. Now that he was wearing his official uniform, he wouldn't encounter any trouble walking on the streets. Previously, he mentioned that as long as he wore this uniform, it would represent that he was an official of Dayo. Even if he didn't look like an aboriginal, the aboriginals would still treat him as one. Being able to stroll around by himself without 2 burly bodyguards made Ren Baqian feel rather comfortable. There weren't many people in the Chun medicine shop. When Chun Zixing saw Ren Baqian, he was a little surprised and asked, Mr. Ren, are you an official in Dayo? Just a nominal position in the Honglu Bureau. Ren Baqian smiled. You are wearing a secondary class, rank 6 official uniform. It shouldn't be as simple as a nominal position. Chun Zixing laughed. Ren Baqian knew that the Honglu Bureau's deputy was a primary class, rank 6 official. However, seeing that Chun Zixing could tell at a glance, Ren Baqian asked him about the differences between official uniforms. Every rank of official had a different uniform. I've learned a lot. Ren Baqian cupped his hands in obeisance. He only knew a little about these things that everyone in Dayo, especially in Lan City, knew about. Chapter 77. After reading various treatises on typhoid and diseases to Chen Zixing for an hour, Ren Baqian left the Chen family's shop, strolled around the streets, and found a two-story restaurant. He wanted to see how the food here tasted. After being here for so many days, he had always eaten in the Beast Park and had not had the opportunity to eat outside. Ren Baqian saw that there were quite a lot of people inside. When he entered, it was quiet inside. There were a few bald, burly men at each table, and all of them looked over. There were also a few heroic-looking women. They were all ordinary aboriginals. If an ordinary person encountered such a scene, his legs would probably go soft. Imagine if you entered a restaurant and all the people inside were 200 to 300 kilograms of burly men. Moreover, all of them were bald and looked at you fiercely. Most people would just turn around and leave. Ren Baqian had seen a lot of such scenes in Dayo these days. He was somewhat used to it and did not mind. When the others saw the official robe that he was wearing, they all turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. They ate the meat in big mouthfuls, chatted loudly, and were extraordinarily lively. Ren Baqian found a table in the corner and sat down. The lights in front of him dimmed, and a burly man appeared in front of him. "Sir, what do you want to eat?" Ren Baqian tilted his head and looked at the other party. The tone and expression of the other party did not seem to be asking him what he wanted to eat, but more like asking him how he wanted to die. Ren Baqian sighed. With regards to these people, he felt helpless. Would it kill him to smile? "What's your specialty?" "Sir, we are good at everything here. As long as one has eaten it, no one would say that it's not delicious," the burly man immediately replied. Ren Baqian sighed again. In his ears, the meaning of the burly man's words was, "No one would dare to say that it's not delicious." "Give me 2 of your specialty dishes and a pot of wine," Ren Baqian said. "All right." The expression and tone of the burly man finally became more lively. He shouted to the back, 2 specialty dishes and a pot of wine." While Ren Baqian waited for the dishes, he listened to the conversations around him. He did not need to listen to them. The loud voices of the Dayo people made it impossible for him to not listen to them. They talked about how grains and noodles were expensive nowadays, which stronghold had a fight with another stronghold, which stronghold had injured a few people during hunting, and which family's wife had severely injured a man. They were no different from ordinary citizens in China. At most, they were a little more boorish, bad-tempered, fierce-looking, stronger, more powerful, and would pick a fight with others whenever they had nothing to do. Ren Baqian felt that there was still quite a big difference between them, but in essence, they were pretty much the same. Of course, there were also those who scolded the merchants of various countries, saying that salt and cloth were expensive, and that they didn't even pay much for furs. Ren Baqian suddenly felt that the world had become a lot more lively after listening to these family gossip. Life was supposed to be like this, full of family trifles, haggling over every ounce. It was not like the palace that he entered and exited every day, which was quiet, cold, and solemn. Not long after, the dishes were served. It was a plate of steamed mutton and a plate of sauce. It was unknown what was used to make the sauce, but it was a little spicy. However, it covered up a lot of the mutton's odor. It tasted pretty good. The other plate was a stewed fish. It was very simple, with only salt and something similar to ginger. However, the fish was tender and tasty. The wine was relatively inferior. It tasted bland and was very turbid. Ren Baqian sat there and listened to the bustle around him. He unhurriedly ate half of the dishes and drank all the wine. He actually felt a little tipsy. "Shopkeeper, bill please," Ren Baqian shouted. "Sir, 80 copper coins." That burly man appeared in front of Ren Baqian again. Ren Baqian took out a piece of silver and threw it on the table. "Keep the change." "Thank you, sir." The burly man grinned. His facial expression became even more ferocious, but Ren Baqian felt that he was more pleasing to the eye. He got up and left the restaurant. Ren Baqian strolled toward the direction of the palace, as if he was taking a stroll. Before he reached the palace, he heard a loud noise in front of him, followed by loud laughter. What happened again? Ren Baqian was curious and quickened his pace. When he was about to reach the plaza, he finally saw the scene in front of him clearly. The surroundings were dark, but the plaza in front of the palace was brightly lit. He saw more than 20 soldiers standing in a circle with torches in their hands. In the middle were 2 men and a woman. Opposite the 3 of them was a burly man holding a long saber. He wore leather armor on his chest and left shoulder. The laughter came from the burly man holding the long saber. As for the 2 men and the woman opposite him, the 2 men were using long swords while the woman was using a pair of short sabers. The 3 of them obviously couldn't care less about the surrounding soldiers. All their attention was focused on the burly man in front of them. Hand over Long Wanli's corpse. You have already killed him. Why won't you let us take his corpse away? We just want to bring his corpse back. The woman shouted angrily. Come, come, come. Let me test your skills. If you can withstand 10 moves from me, I will let you leave. If you can kill me, I will let you take my corpse away. I guarantee that no one will seek revenge on you. If you can't withstand 10 moves from me, you will also be buried here. The burly man held the saber and laughed wildly. Do you mean what you say? Who are you? One of the men looked around at the surrounding soldiers and shouted. I'm the left guard commander of the palace, Shan Wanshui. Remember this name well, the burly man shouted. As for the 3 of you, report your names to me after you survive. The 3 of them looked at each other. It was already difficult enough to deal with more than 20 soldiers around them, not to mention the middle guard commander in front of them. There was only one path in front of the 3 of them. Kill this middle guard commander or withstand 10 moves from him. Otherwise they would definitely die tonight. Rinpoche saw everything clearly from afar and sighed in his heart. Why did they have to come all the way here to deliver their heads? Wasn't it good to be alive? Why did they have to die? Let's see if you, the middle guard commander, are really that powerful. One of the men shouted and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a flash of light in the air like a flower blooming. Showy but impractical. Shan Wanshui laughed and didn't make any other moves. He held the end of his saber and swung it over. There was only a brilliant saber gleam in the air. Sword shadows and flowers were all cut down. That man was shocked and quickly placed his sword in front of his chest. Clang! The sword broke with a sound. Zitao! The other man and woman shouted angrily and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a rain of blood in the air. That man was split into 2 halves. As the 2 halves of the corpse fell to the ground, blood and internal organs spilled all over. Rinpoche felt disgusted looking at it from afar. It was really too disgusting. However, the people who came this time were really too weak. With this standard, they still dared to snatch Long Wanli's corpse in front of Dayo's palace. This confirmed Rinpoche's opinion that they really came all the way here to deliver their heads. Fortunately, there were 3 of them. If there were 2 more, Shan Wanshui could have killed 5 people tonight. As for Shan Wanshui, he swept his saber horizontally at the 2 people who pounced on him. His movements were incomparably swift. The saber gleam reflected the flames like lightning and disappeared in a flash. The 2 people knew that they couldn't withstand it and dodged. Third move. Shan Wanshui shouted. He held his saber and chopped at the man who was closest to him, smashing a stone slab on the ground into pieces. Fourth move. The hilt of the saber moved toward the woman who was thrusting her twin short sabers. The moment the twin sabers came in contact with the lady, she felt a jolt in her arms. There was a sharp pain in the area between her thumb and forefinger, and the twin sabers were bounced off. Chapter 78. Hong Xian. The remaining man howled in grief. I'll fight you to the death, he roared. His entire body transformed into a shooting star as he charged toward Shan Wanshui with his sword. His posture was similar to Long Wanli's, but his aura was far inferior. A ray of light flashed past. The burly man stood up with his sword in hand. Only 6 moves. He then burst out laughing. The burly man's attacks weren't as flashy as the others. Every move was powerful and fast as lightning, but the others couldn't even parry. The commander is mighty. Cheers could be heard from the sidelines. The deaths of the 3 men did not cause any ripples in the hearts of the others. They were already used to it. Rinpoche looked on helplessly as the 3 men died without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. One man was split in half from the middle, one at the waist, and the last man was split diagonally from shoulder to waist. Fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Such a cruel scene sent chills down Renbachian's spine. At the same time, his stomach was in turmoil. The last time Long Wanli challenged the Empress, he was beaten into the ground with just one move. By the time he was able to move after being poked by Caretaker Shi's electric baton, the square had already started to fill in the holes. In addition, both sides used a sword and a palm to determine the victor. Renbachian couldn't see the duel clearly, and only saw Long Wanli's back view. Even though he felt it was a pity that Long Wanli was dead, Renbachian was more excited to see a duel between two experts. At this moment, what Renbachian saw was a bloody massacre. The shock he received and the feeling of barbarism and bloodshed were far greater than the previous time. It could even be said that it was something he had never felt before in his life. He always felt that death was far away from him. Even though he almost lost his head when he first arrived in this world, he managed to survive in the end. This made him, who rarely saw death, feel a sense of alienation from it. However, it was different this time. The brutal massacre was happening in front of him. It made him realize that this world was far crueler than what he had always seen. Just as Renbachian stood there with his mind blank, the soldiers at the side of the field had already started to clean up. They dug a hole under the broken stone slab, and threw the severed limbs into it. Then they started to fill the hole with soil. Not long after, the entire hole was filled up. All that was left was for the stonemason to install another stone slab. It wasn't until those soldiers left that the onlookers dispersed, leaving only Renbachian standing there with ice-cold hands and feet. After a long time, Renbachian dragged his heavy footsteps back to the beast park. Gun Gun and Tian Tian had already fallen asleep on the stone slab. Renbachian's head was in a mess as images kept flashing through his mind. Suddenly, the horrifying scene of him being decapitated like the other three flashed across his mind. That scene made him feel suffocated, and he abruptly sat up on the bed. That one move made him break out in a cold sweat. No matter what, I can't become like that, like those three people, Renbachian muttered to himself. This isn't Earth, it's a different world. It's not as safe as Earth, and human lives aren't that precious. In the future, I can't just laze around like this. I have to work harder, and take the initiative to climb up. Only when my position is so high that others can't move will I be safe. The higher my position, the stronger my importance, the safer I will be, and the further away I will be from the threat of death. I have the backing of a civilized world that is far superior to this place. How can I continue to be muddle-headed and put my life in the hands of others? If it's possible, I want to become stronger too. Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Renbachian's mind. Finally, they merged into one. He wanted to become stronger, have a higher position, and make himself safer. Only then would he be able to survive in this world. Even though he had such thoughts in the past, they were never as clear, firm, and real as they were now. As a youth who often had fantasies and an ordinary person, the sudden revelation of another side of this world shattered the muddle-headedness that he had been muddle-headed all this while. He felt that the things that he had been working hard and doing in the past were really too little. It was far from enough. Especially after he had gotten rid of the crisis of survival and gained a foothold. He actually began to relax. He had underestimated this world. After tossing and turning for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, he was woken up by a knock on his door. He didn't sleep well that night. Even after he fell asleep, everything that happened at the scene would surface in his mind from time to time, forming a dream. When he woke up, he realized that he was drenched in sweat. He picked up a bowl of water and gulped it down. Renbachian got up and pushed open the door. He saw Caretaker Shi outside. "Why is your face so pale?" Caretaker Shi looked at Renbachian and asked curiously. "Maybe I caught a cold last night. Your small physique is too weak." Caretaker Shi laughed boorishly. "The Imperial Kitchen asked you to visit them when you are free." Renbachian nodded. "I got it. I will go after I finish my work at the Honglu Bureau today. Brother Ren, you can arrange for me to come over." Caretaker Shi waved his hand and left. Renbachian looked at Caretaker Shi's back as he left. Caretaker Shi still treated him the same as before, but he felt that something was different. It was because his state of mind was different. The Aboriginals had a warm side, a straightforward and adorable side, but also a cruel side. This was what he felt just now. After washing up, he picked up his official robe. This was what he relied on to survive. After putting on his robe, he left the beast park. When he passed by the plaza, he could still smell the lingering smell of blood in the air. However, he didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, he picked up the book 300 Song Poems and continued to memorize it. After a while, he felt tired and went to the backyard to watch some people from the Honglu Bureau practice martial arts. Xiongpai was still playing with that rock that weighed 2 to 3 tons. No one came to the Honglu Bureau for the whole day. Mr. Emptiness and Ning Kaichen, who arrived earlier, didn't have anything to do. Ren Baqian was happy to stay in his room. In the afternoon, he reckoned that it was almost time. He bade farewell and went straight to the imperial kitchen. When Ren Baqian arrived, the imperial kitchen had just delivered dinner to the Empress. Everyone was sitting there resting. When they saw Ren Baqian, they greeted him one after another. "Brother Ren." "The greetings of Brother Ren." Ren Baqian smiled and asked, "Where's caretaker go?" "He went to deliver dinner to Her Majesty. Looking at the time, he should be back soon," someone immediately replied. Ren Baqian nodded his head. "Are you looking for me because of Her Majesty's birthday banquet?" "Brother Ren, it's like this. Caretaker Go hopes that you can participate in making some dishes. After all, we have just familiarized ourselves with your spices. Now that Her Majesty's birthday banquet is just around the corner, we don't have time to slowly experiment." Ren Baqian nodded his head, found a place to sit down, and waited for Caretaker Go to return. Not long after, Caretaker Go came back and saw Ren Baqian. His face twitched for a long time and he called out, "Brother Ren." "Forget it, call me Storyteller Ren in the future. This is my current position in the palace." Ren Baqian waved his hand and said, "Seeing that you are in a difficult position, I won't make things difficult for you." Chapter 79. Ren Baqian tilted his head and looked at him. "Then why did you look like you were eating **T just now?" "Up to you." Ren Baqian shrugged. "Brother Ren, the dishes for Her Majesty's birthday banquet." Caretaker Go called out again. This time, he was much more straightforward. It seemed like the hurdle in his heart had been overcome. "Make 2, 1 normal and 1 unorthodox. Let's see if those people are to Her Majesty's liking. If Her Majesty is happy, we won't torture them. If Her Majesty is unhappy, they can forget about having a good meal," Ren Baqian said. Upon hearing Ren Baqian's words, everyone in the imperial kitchen laughed. "How are the arrangements for the banquet? How many people to a table? How many dishes?" Ren Baqian asked again. "A table for 2, 6 dishes, and a bowl of soup for each person. Her Majesty said that this year's banquet will be different from previous years," Caretaker Go said. Ren Baqian nodded his head. This wasn't much. It was simply too easy to come up with 6 main dishes from the Chinese menu. Any birthday banquet or wedding banquet would have at least a dozen dishes. Meatballs for happiness, meatballs, twice-cooked pork, and so on. He was sure that the tongues of those who came would be swallowed. Ren Baqian stayed in the imperial kitchen until midnight. He first picked 8 dishes and let the imperial kitchen chefs practice making them. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and make them into the menu. As for the other menu, Ren Baqian was prepared to go back and study the dark cuisine. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and 1 soup. If he chose this, Ren Baqian was confident that he would definitely give those who came this time an unforgettable experience. A rather unforgettable kind. He guaranteed that they would come back to the banquet next year after eating their fill. The following morning, Ren Baqian was listening to Ning Kaichen brag. It seemed that he realized that Ren Baqian was the only one who could listen to him after going 1 round yesterday. Early in the morning, he came over not long after Ren Baqian arrived and told Ren Baqian the legendary stories of his journey. Ren Baqian was very interested in many of the things he talked about. For example, the local conditions and customs of various places. In the morning, a large group of carriages entered Lan City. The convoy first stopped at a location on Jingyang Street. There were 3 shops there, and all of them were sealed with seals on their doors. The signboard above said Wan Jialu. A man with a mustache and wearing a purple silk robe came down from the carriage. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the 3 sealed shops. Third uncle, is this our family business in Lan City? A man came down from the other 2 carriages. They were both in their 20s, one handsome and the other handsome. Not bad. Your third uncle and the others are all in prison. This time, we came for this matter. The man called fifth uncle said. These barbarians, one of the valiant-looking young men said indignantly, his face filled with anger. Silence. This isn't our home. Remember, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. If something happens to you here, no one can save you. The middle-aged man frowned. I know I was wrong. The valiant man quickly lowered his head and said, You 2 know what we're going to do this time, right? The middle-aged man asked. I know. But fifth uncle, is that Qi Zixiao really as beautiful as a flower? The handsome young man asked. Not just that. When I came to Dayo in the past, I saw her from afar. She was an exceptional beauty. I brought you 2 here just in case. Don't think too much about it. There are a lot of talented young men with the same idea in every country. Now the Yin nation's imperial court is in chaos. That man alone holds power and rejects dissidents. The undercurrent is surging, and we have no choice but to find a place to retreat. There are many wealthy families in Great Xia. Even though we have already made arrangements, it won't be easy to gain a foothold. I was the one who strongly advocated for Dayo. Dayo doesn't lack brave generals and warriors, but it lacks capable people who can govern the country. Even though the current Empress of Dayo is a young woman, her breadth of mind is far from that of an ordinary person. If the 2 of you can display your talents and interest her, you might be able to gain a foothold in Dayo. Unfortunately, even though your third uncle has been managing the business for many years, he is greedy by nature. Not only did he lose himself, but he also lost the business here. The reputation of the Zhang family has also been ruined by him. This time, we are here mainly to salvage the situation here. As for the rest, it's fine as long as you know it. There's no need to force it. Got it, fifth uncle. We believe what you said. In our family, fifth uncle's foresight and knowledge are incomparable to others. We are well aware of it. However, there is a little doubt. If we stay here and people find out, I'm afraid we won't be able to explain to our family, the handsome young man said after they looked at each other. You don't have to worry too much about this. I found 2 people early on who are enough to impersonate you in the family. As long as you live in seclusion, you don't have to worry about being discovered. Even if people find out about your situation here, it's just a coincidence that you have the same name and looks. The family can still settle this matter. Let's go to the Honglu Bureau. The middle-aged man waved his hand at them and ended the conversation. After they returned to the car, their hearts weren't calm. They knew what the middle-aged man meant. He wanted them to find an official position here. Even though they didn't like this barren land, they had no other choice for the sake of their family. However, they were curious about Qi Zixiao, whom the middle-aged man called an exceptional beauty. They wanted to see what the Empress of Dayo, who was praised so highly by their fifth uncle, looked like. The carriage arrived at the Honglu Bureau. A moment later, Ren Baqian received the news and went out with Xiong Pai. At a glance, he saw the 3 people standing at the entrance and the carriage a little further away. In the middle was a middle-aged man with an elegant face and a mustache. The 2 youths behind him were extremely good-looking. They are here to use their beauty trap. Ren Baqian thought to himself when he saw the 2 of them. They are trying to snatch my food. I have to suppress them even without Her Majesty's orders. The other party was stunned when they saw him. This Honglu deputy wasn't an aboriginal, nor was he a remnant citizen of the Hao nation. He looked more like someone from Great Xia or the Yin nation. This meant that someone was one step ahead of them. This thought emerged in the minds of the few of them. How do I address the few of you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Ren Baqian asked calmly. He was neither indifferent nor enthusiastic. I'm Zhang Junzheng. These 2 are from the same family, Zhongheqi and Zhongheju. They know that Her Majesty's birthday is in a few days, so they specially brought gifts from the Yun nation. May I know how to address you, sir? My surname is Run Rinpochian. You can also call me Deputy Run. Rinpochian smiled politely. Sir Run, that's a good name. The Kuan Peng spreads its wings for 8,000 miles, and will definitely soar to the top. Zhongheju, the handsome youth, praised. Chapter 80. How long has Sir Ren been in the Honglu Bureau? I've been to Lan City before, but this is the first time I've seen a foreigner serving as an official in Dayo. It's obvious that Her Majesty favors Sir Ren, which is admirable, Zhang Junjing said with a smile as he followed Rinpochian into the Honglu Bureau with his two nephews. I've only been in this position for a short while. Rinpochian waved his hand. This matter couldn't be kept a secret, and anyone would find out after asking around. Oh, Zhang Junjing's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble you to fill out this form. Rinpochian took out 3 pieces of paper and handed it to the 3 nephews. After telling them what he needed, he sat behind the table and quietly observed them. Zhang Junjing was the leader among them, but this time, the main characters were probably the other 2 gigolos. Where do you want to stay? Do you have a place to stay? Rinpochian asked after seeing them finish writing. I'll have to trouble sir to arrange it. Zhang Junjing cupped his hands. Xiongpai, bring them to the 2 courtyards beside Ning Kaichen, Rinpochian instructed. All right, deputy. Come with me. Xiongpai shouted at the few of them. Thank you, sir. Zhang Junjing and the other 2 nephews cupped their hands. Rinpochian nodded and fell into deep thought after they left. These people looked like they came from big clans. They were different from ordinary people and had a sense of propriety in their words and actions. Even though they had always treated him with courtesy, Rinpochian didn't have a good impression of them. It was entirely due to the changes in his mentality over the past 2 days that made him feel a sense of crisis. At the same time, he was also thinking about a problem. Now that he was an official in Dayo, what about the people from other nations? Could they? There weren't any in the past, but that didn't mean that there wouldn't be any in the future. In the afternoon, 2 groups of people arrived one after another. One group was from Great Xia and had the surname Lian. The other group was also from the Yun nation and had the surname Hong. Like the Zhang family, these 2 groups of people came in a long line with carriages and horses. They also brought a lot of goods or gifts. Rinpochian asked Xiongpai to bring them over. When Xiongpai returned, he muttered, Sir, those bastards don't know what's good for them. They actually complained that the conditions are too simple and crude. They're all like this. In my opinion, it's already not bad, but they're still complaining about this and that. Rinpochian squinted his eyes slightly. He knew that Xiongpai was talking about the people from the Lian family, who had just been sent over. From the young master of the Lian family to the servants. All of them had an arrogant look on their faces. Especially that young master of the Lian family. His eyeballs were almost on top of his head. Next time, let them find their own accommodation, Rinpochian said casually. That night, Rinpochian handed over the task to someone else and returned to Earth. For the past 3 days, he had been studying and thinking in his room. His mind was completely focused on that world. There were too many aspects to consider. In the past, he was like a spinning top that would only spin once the rope was pulled. Other than saving his own life, his other thoughts were only to create something that existed on Earth or how to earn money. He had never systematically considered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. However, during these 3 days on Earth, he had figured out his future path. What he was good at was nothing more than relying on the Earth and being famous in the world. As for other aspects, needless to say, he reckoned that no one in Dayo above the age of 10 was weaker than him. As for intellect, he was just an ordinary person with no foresight or wisdom. All he had was the technology, culture, and various theoretical knowledge that had been developed on Earth. This was the only thing that he could show that would make people value him. Even though the individual strength in this world was very strong, they were far from being strong enough to ignore technology. Technology was also very important to them, and culture and various theories were equally important to Dayo. In the past, he was thinking of doing something to earn some money and please the Empress. But now, it seemed that those were just small things. If he wanted people to value him, he had to systematically improve the various aspects of Dayo's technology and academic knowledge. Only in this way could his position not be shaken by anything and not be affected by anything. Of course, cozying up to the Empress was indispensable. In this world he knew nothing, had nothing, and had no foundation at all. In this short period of time, only by cozying up to the Empress would he be safe and sound, and be able to do things that could show his value. Renbachian thought about it a lot. Even though there were still some flaws and it wasn't very comprehensive, he already had a clear goal. The rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. When he returned to that world again, his eyes were clear and he completely knew what to do and how to do it. Brother Ren, you seem a little different today, Caretaker sure said curiously when he saw Renbachian in the morning. I have figured out some things that I have never understood, Renbachian said with a smile. If you can't figure it out, just throw it aside. When the time comes, you will know what to do, Caretaker sure said indifferently, causing Renbachian to smile. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, Qi Heng and Qi Sheng were still standing at the entrance. When they saw him, they greeted him one after another. Did anyone come yesterday? Renbachian asked casually. There was a group of carriages and a group of 3 people riding on horses. I saw Xiongpai bringing them away. It should have been arranged, Qi Heng replied. Renbachian nodded his head to indicate that he understood. When he entered the deputy's room, a burly man was sitting behind the table with a sluggish look on his face. If he drooled, he would be a living retard. Renbachian patted the table. Official Registrar Shi. That burly man quivered. When he saw that it was Renbachian, he hurriedly stood up and said, Deputy Ren, you are back. Have you settled the matter? Yes, Renbachian said faintly. Did anything happen yesterday? This person was the official registrar of the Honglu Bureau. Renbachian asked him to make the arrangements yesterday. The reason was very easy to find. The Empress was arranging other matters. In any case, it was impossible for him to confront the Empress. The Empress also knew that he would disappear once every few days. 2 groups of people came yesterday. I have arranged for them to go over. That burly man said. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Thank you very much. Renbachian revealed a smile. The burly man grinned at Renbachian. Without saying anything else, he immediately left the house. Renbachian walked 1 round in the house, and then came to the backyard. Sure enough, Xiongpai was playing with that huge rock there. When he saw Renbachian, he hurriedly threw the huge rock like a rubber ball and ran over. You continue with your training. I will take a look here, Renbachian said as he felt the huge rock landing on the ground. In the afternoon, when Renbachian and Xiongpai were staying in the room, a low-ranking official who was usually in charge of the affairs at the Honglu Bureau's courier station ran over to report, Sir, there is a fight over there. However, there wasn't much panic on his face. It seemed that he was just here to inform Renbachian about this matter. In any case, they were all from abroad. As long as they didn't damage the courier station, the people from the Honglu Bureau wouldn't care at all. Renbachian leaned back and asked, Did they kill anyone? Sir, they weren't when I came. That person laughed. At this moment, Deputy Ren's manner of speaking was very similar to Deputy Qi in the past. What happened? Renbachian then asked. I am not too sure either. In any case, they quarreled for a while before fighting, that person said. Which courtyard? Courtyard number 2 and 8. Renbachian thought for a while. It was Mr. Emptiness and the people from the Lien family from Great Xia. Chapter 81. Renbachian brought Xiongpai and the burly man named Gonggu out of the Honglu Bureau. His footsteps were not hurried, and it was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. However, his mind was thinking about how to resolve this matter. After all, they were here to deliver gifts to the Empress. If they couldn't resolve this matter properly in a private fight, it would make them look incompetent and cause more trouble. The Honglu Bureau wasn't far from the post house. They just had to walk around the corner to get there. From afar, Renbachian could see a group of people surrounding the place, and could even hear their cheers. The group of burly men outside were mostly Dayo people. At this moment, they had turned into a crowd of onlookers, cheering and applauding one after another. However, when Renbachian got closer, he also saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Saichen's petite figure was squeezing through the crowd. After spending a long time trying to squeeze through the crowd, Ning Kaichen was suddenly pushed back 5 or 6 steps and fell on his butt. Ning Kaichen cursed his bad luck after he got up. He realized that he couldn't squeeze through the crowd, so he jumped outside the crowd like a spring. When Renbachian came over, he saw this scene. Suddenly, he inexplicably thought of the time when he watched Long Wanli challenge the Empress. Wasn't it the same as Ning Kaichen? A feeling of empathy arose in his heart. The aboriginals were too much of a bully. Ning Kaichen jumped, but he could only see a small part of the fight. This made him extremely anxious. He loved watching such a big show the most. Why was he late for such a big show? At this moment, he felt someone pat him on the back. He quickly turned his head and saw Xiongpai's wall-like figure. Soon after, he saw Renbachian looking at him with an embarrassed expression on his face. Xiongpai's body was like a wall. Ning Kaichen didn't feel embarrassed at all. When he saw Renbachian, he quickly pulled him and said, "Deputy Ren, there is a fight going on inside. I don't know if their brains are smashed. Quickly go in and see what's going on." Renbachian looked at Ning Kaichen and pondered. You can't wait for their brains to be smashed, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Xiongpai. Renbachian turned his head and called out to Xiongpai. Xiongpai immediately understood. He stretched his arms forward, picked up the 2 people in front of Renbachian, and placed them to the side. The 2 of them felt themselves being lifted into the air. They immediately turned their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Xiongpai's figure, they glared at him instead. With Xiongpai clearing the way, it was much easier for Renbachian to get in. Ning Kaichen, who was behind him, hurriedly followed behind. He blindly followed Renbachian's every step for fear that he would be squeezed out again. By the time there were no more people in front of him, Renbachian had already entered the innermost circle, and was able to see the scene clearly. The one who attacked was not Mr. Emptiness, as he had expected. He was coughing up blood at the side. 4 delicate girls were circling around a black-clothed old man, throwing punches and palms at him. Although the black-clothed old man wasn't injured, he was trapped and unable to break out. Those 4 ladies were naturally the ones who carried the sedan. Upon seeing this scene, Renbachian was finally sure that they weren't hired. This thought had been going around in his mind for a few days. Today he was finally able to confirm it. As for the black-clothed old man, he was an old butler of the Lien family. He had extraordinary skills, and if it weren't for the tacit cooperation of these 4 ladies, it would have been difficult to trap him. However, they were only able to trap him. Mr. Lien Baocheng, who was at the back, was watching the fight with a fierce look on his face. He wasn't happy that he couldn't deal with these ladies even after such a long time. At this moment, someone beside him said something. He looked up and immediately saw Xiongpai's huge figure. If this barbarian was here, then the deputy would definitely be here as well. A ruthless look flashed across Lien Baocheng's face. Lien Baocheng, beat them to death. Everyone in the crowd immediately heard this sentence. A few beautiful ladies actually wanted to beat them to death. How vicious and merciless. When Renbachian heard this, he was stunned. He looked to the opposite side and saw that Lien Baocheng had just shifted his gaze to the side as if he didn't see Renbachian. However, Renbachian clearly saw Lien Baocheng shifting his gaze away from him. With Xiongpai's huge figure, it was impossible for him not to see it. When Renbachian thought about how Lien Baocheng had complained a few days ago, he sneered in his heart. Was he trying to humiliate him? At this moment, the situation of the battle suddenly changed. Following Lien Baocheng's shout, although Lien Cheng's aura didn't change, his moves became much more ferocious. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard. One of the young ladies flipped backward, and a white light flashed from her abdomen to her neck. Her clothes were cut into 2, and her breasts were exposed. However, a line of blood spurted out from the abdomen of that young lady. At this moment, everyone realized that there was a soft sword in Lien Baocheng's hand. Like a venomous snake, it tried to bite the other 3. If this young lady hadn't dodged in time, her abdomen would have been cut open. Even now, she was still severely injured. Originally, the four young ladies could only trap Lian Baqian, who was unarmed. Now that there was one less person and Lian Baqian had a weapon in his hand, the situation immediately changed. The few of them were immediately surrounded by danger. In just a short while, a few more wounds appeared on their bodies. Seeing this situation, Mr. Emptiness coughed even more violently. Originally, he was using a handkerchief to cover his mouth. The handkerchief was stained with traces of blood, but now he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. Like a sharp arrow, it wasn't shot toward the old man in the middle of the battlefield, but directly toward Lian Baoqing's face. "Be careful, mister," someone suddenly shouted from the side. A burly man unsheathed his long saber and blocked the blood arrow. When the blood arrow hit the long saber, it immediately lost its strength and fell to the ground. Then, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The place where the blood splashed on the long saber seemed to have melted. First it softened. Then, half of the long saber fell to the ground with a clang. Lian Baoqing was shocked by this situation. If even a steel saber was like this, he would shudder in fear if the blood were to hit him. A streak of green flashed across his face. His gaze toward Mr. Emptiness was filled with a wild, murderous intent. Rinpochian was also surprised. How was that blood that was spurted out? It was obviously strong acid, wasn't it? It was impossible for human blood to be corrosive. Could it be that there was also super strong gastric acid? Rinpochian had always heard the phrase, "I spit on you." Today he had learned something new. If this Mr. Emptiness spat on someone's face, it wouldn't be as simple as disfigurement. Kill them, including that sickly guy. Go kill them. I want to hack them into pieces. Lian Baoqing had a crazy look on his face. Hearing his shout, Rinpochian knew that this show couldn't continue. If he continued to watch, his brain would really be smashed to pieces. With a gloomy face, Rinpochian turned his head and said to Xiong Pai, "Stop them. If anyone dares to make a move after I shout for them to stop, kill them without mercy." This was Dayo's imperial capital. If they continued to stir up trouble, he would be done for. Chapter 82. After Rinpochian shouted, none of the people in the field stopped, or rather, they didn't dare to stop. If they stopped and the other party didn't, they would immediately fall into a disadvantageous position. Furthermore, they simply didn't have the time to see who shouted. Xiong Pai, separate them. Those who don't listen, kill them. While Rinpochian was speaking with a gloomy face, Lian Baoqing was still hooting. Kill them. I want to skin them to use as cushions for my chair. As for that sickly guy, I want to chop him into pieces. However, he was destined to fail. Xiong Pai rushed into the group of people in a few steps. With a swing of his arm, he hit a young girl in front of him. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out of the crowd while vomiting blood. Have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Xiong Pai didn't have such a thought. In any case, he would do whatever the deputy instructed him to do. The old man in black, Lian Baoqing, saw that there was no time to lose. The flexible sword in his hand turned into a myriad of stars, and went straight for the other two young girls. The two young girls shouted angrily. As they dodged the cold rays, they turned their heads to look at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai directly and efficiently kicked at the old man in black. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the old man leaped into the air to avoid this kick. His flexible sword turned into a poisonous snake, and went straight for Xiong Pai. Regardless of whether it was for self-protection or for other reasons, he actually attacked Xiong Pai. This action made Rinpochian laugh incessantly. Xiong Pai let out a deep roar from his throat. This man, who had always given Rinpochian the impression of a simple and honest man, finally revealed his fangs. He simply ignored those specks of cold light, raised his hands high, and directly hammered down. Although Lian Baqian used his arms to block in time, how could he withstand Xiong Pai's brute force? Bang! Everyone in the field felt the ground under their feet shake. Lian Baqian was smashed into the ground by Xiong Pai. Liang Yu Lianqi, stop, come back. Cough cough. Mr. Emptiness shouted. Because their sisters were sent flying, They were hesitating whether to attack Xiongpai or the seriously injured Lian Baqian. Mr. Even though the two young girls knew that they were no match for Xiongpai, they still glared at him fiercely before obeying his order to retreat. Ren Baqian frowned as he walked into the field. What's going on? No one answered. When the surrounding Dayo people saw a foreigner dressed in a Dayo official's uniform walking into the arena, they curiously inquired about him, and found out that he was the newly appointed Honglu deputy. They continued to watch the show. Lian Baoqing looked at Lian Tong, who had half his body in the ground, and then looked at Xiongpai's huge body. After being shocked by Xiongpai's huge strength, his lips trembled for a long time. You actually dare? Oh, dare what? Ren Baqian looked at Lian Baoqing with a smile on his face. Then he lowered his head to look at Lian Baoqing, who was already limp and unconscious. Ren Baqian looked at Lian Baoqing with pity and said, "What a pity. You actually attacked Xiongpai and got beaten up so badly." TSK. Ren Baqian sighed. It's quite painful to live like this. Trample him to death, and help him to be free. Ren Baqian's words were completely different from what he had said before, and everyone immediately fell silent. Lian Baoqing, Ning Kaichen, and even the people from the Zhang and Hong clans standing at the side felt a chill down their spines. They suddenly felt that this Honglu deputy, who looked easy to bully, was actually a vicious wolf who would devour people without spitting out the bones. How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill your entire family. Lian Baoqing jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on and clamored at Ren Baqian. Xiongpai had a few bloody scars on his body, but he acted as if he didn't feel them. Just by looking at the hideous scars on his body, one could guess that this kind of injury had almost no effect on him. Ren Baqian grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He lifted his leg and stepped on Lian Baoqing's exposed chest. Kacha. Uft. First Xiongpai's bones shattered. Then, like a water bag being stepped on, fresh blood spurted out from his 5 orifices. Ren Baqian suppressed the disgust in his heart and revealed a calm and unruffled smile. He looked at Lian Baoqing and said, "Attacking an official of the Honglu Bureau in Dayo? You guys are really gutsy. Do you think there's no one capable in Dayo?" Seeing Ren Baqian's smile, even Lian Baoqing, who had a lawless temperament, felt his heart tremble. Following which, his heart was filled with rage and endless humiliation. That's his normal reaction after being attacked. Lian Baoqing squeezed out these few words from the gaps of his teeth. Ever since he was young, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He had never been humiliated like this before. The rage in his heart was about to ignite his entire body. If it wasn't for Ren Baqian's words that woke him up a little, he would have already gone crazy. Xiongpai's reaction is also normal. He was stomped to death by your order. Lian Baoqing felt as if his heart was on fire. He felt like he was going to explode in the next moment. There must be a punishment for attacking an official, isn't there? Otherwise, if anyone did this for no reason, where would the dignity of Dayo be? Ren Baqian smiled and walked in front of Lian Baoqing. The surrounding Dayo people all laughed. They felt that this Honglu Bureau deputy who looked like a foreigner was a good person, and they liked him very much. This time, I'm here to participate in the birthday celebration of the Dayo Emperor. I've brought a gift with me. I'll definitely report your actions to the higher-ups. My great Xia's envoy will also inform your emperor. Lian Baoqing's face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was spinning quickly on how to kill this bastard in front of him. Not only did he have to die, but his entire family had to die as well. Ren Baqian touched Lian Baoqing's cheek. This action made the surrounding people feel disgusted. Therefore, before that, you have to be careful and don't commit any more crimes. Otherwise, I'll throw you into prison and the gift you brought will still belong to Her Majesty. However, by then you might not be the one to send it to the emperor. As for the rest, you can do whatever you want. Ren Baqian laughed. Ren Baqian's words made Lian Baoqing feel as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. Ren Baqian walked back to the center of the square and said, I don't care how this incident happened today. I hope that all of you and the people who will come after you know that no matter what your status is in your own country, or how tyrannical you usually are. You have to remember that this is Dayo. Whether you are a dragon or a tiger, you have to crouch down. I don't care if you guys fight to death outside, but don't create trouble for me here." After Renbachian finished speaking, the surrounding people were dead silent. Following which, those Dayo people who were watching the commotion cheered loudly. Renbachian revealed a smile to the surrounding people. He softened his voice and said gently, "Everyone here isn't an ordinary person. Treat yourself better. If you want to make things difficult for yourself, don't do it here. Xiongpai, let's go." Renbachian snapped his fingers and walked outside. At the same time, he didn't forget to shout, "Gonggu, let the Public Order Bureau handle this matter." "Yes, sir." The burly man called Gonggu quickly replied. This Sir Ren had just been appointed not long ago. They had discussed about him in private and more or less looked down on him. After this incident, he realized that this Sir Ren was much more ruthless than what he looked like on the surface. He really liked the way Renbachian handled today. Chapter 83. Renbachian left the crowd. After turning a corner, his face started to turn pale and his back started to sweat profusely. He never thought that he would actually do such a thing. Even he was shocked by what he did just now and even felt that it was terrifying. Those words, that behavior, it was completely unlike what he would do. Once he returned to the Honglu Bureau, he immediately rushed to the toilet and retched. Just now, he was beside him and personally gave the order to step on a person like a cockroach. Although he deliberately did not lower his head to look at that scene, the sound was still transmitted to his ears. That final sound somewhat sounded like a persimmon being crushed. Thinking of the scene of the persimmon being crushed, he immediately vomited. After a long time, he finally came out of the toilet with a forehead full of sweat. He did not know if what he did today was right. However, he knew that he had to intimidate those people. For example, Lian Baoqing's family had a huge influence in the local area. He had been spoiled since he was young, and was used to being tyrannical. If he did not intimidate him, who knew what would happen in the following days? Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Those who came from afar were definitely not ordinary people. Among them, there were not many who were kind. Just like that Mr. Emptiness, if not for Xiongpai by his side that day, he would have already gotten into trouble. There were about 13 days left before the Empress's birthday celebration. At this time, not many people had arrived. In a few days, there would be more people. Who knows, there might be many who had a feud with each other. Even if there was no feud, there might be conflicts because of their different styles. This was the first task that the Empress assigned to him. He absolutely could not mess it up and had to do it well, no matter what method he used. Previously, he thought that it would be enough to suppress the other party by reciting poems. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly felt that it was somewhat ridiculous. He had really thought too simply. Perhaps those people had really received more than 10 years of education, but in essence, they were not ordinary students. It was hard to say what they would do. At the same time, Renbachian also began to think about why the Empress assigned him to do this. After thinking for a long time, he still could not figure out the main point. In any case, he should just do what that person instructed him to do. Instead of thinking about this, he might as well think about whether the gift he gave the Empress was suitable or not. Not long after Renbachian left, the people from the Public Order Bureau arrived. At this moment, more than half of the crowd had already dispersed. Lian Baoqing left with an ashen face after Renbachian left. He didn't even bring Lian Baoqing's corpse with him. Of course, he still had to stay in Dayo for so many days. He couldn't possibly leave a corpse by his side every day. Coupled with the weather in Dayo, it was estimated that the house would be uninhabitable within 2 days. Although 2 of Mr. Emptiness's subordinates were injured, it was still much better than Lian Baoqing's losing face and his right-hand man. After pacifying the 2 maids, she felt a deep fear of Renbachian. The previous probing had made him feel that the Chamberlain of Dependency's deputy was putting on a brave front, but his actions today made him look at him in a different light. He would no longer think that way again. Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Although the people of Dayo were barbaric and overbearing in the past, that was all there was to it. It wasn't like something like today hadn't happened before, but at most, they would be whipped a few times after they separated. However, Renbachian was different. At that time, the feeling he gave them was that of a wolf that would swallow people whole, without spitting out the bones. He was filled with a sinister aura. The reason why they felt this way was because of the contrast between Renbachian's usual behavior and his behavior at that time. This kind of contrast made them feel that Renbachian was originally this kind of person. That afternoon, the Empress was in the palace looking at a piece of paper that recorded Renbachian's actions. And below her was Gu Daxiong, who was known to not care about anything. Interesting. The Empress laughed. Renbachian's actions this time made her feel that it was interesting. Even she didn't expect that Renbachian would actually do such a thing. It was different from what she originally thought. However, this made her feel that it was very interesting. Gu Daxiong, who was below, heard the Empress's words and laughed. This deputy Ren looks like a weakling, but when he does things he is rather straightforward. Originally, I was a little worried, but now, I can wash my hands of this matter. Let him do what he wants, the Empress said indifferently. Yes, Gu Daxiong replied. At the same time, in the residence of Great Xia's envoy in Dayo, Lian Baoqing had a ferocious look on his face. That Honglu deputy with the surname Ren, I want him dead. Is there any way? Sitting opposite Lian Baoqing was a man in his 30s. He had a beard and slightly tanned skin. In fact, before coming to Dayo, he wasn't like this. However, after staying in Dayo for a long time, it was fine if he didn't want to be tanned. His name was Gu Zicheng. At this moment he was looking at Lian Baoqing with a smile. Do you think this is Great Xia? It is precisely because this is Dayo that I came to look for you. You can state your conditions, for example, helping you return to Great Xia? Lian Baoqing said. Gu Zicheng shook his head slightly. Even though your proposal is very tempting and I have long been sick of this damn place, I still have to say that this is Dayo, not Great Xia. This is the territory of those barbarians. Creating trouble here is tantamount to seeking death. They won't care about your identity. You should have experienced this before. Let me give you a suggestion. Swallow your anger first. Lian Baoqing stared intently at Gu Zicheng. After a while he said, Then you can stay here until you die. After Lian Baoqing left, a young man in a loose robe with big sleeves walked in from the next room and sat opposite Gu Zicheng. Your Highness. Gu Zicheng bowed his head. No need to be so courteous. The man who was addressed as Your Highness laughed. This generation of the Lian family is really good for nothing. Each of them is worse than the other. He was the 7th prince of Great Xia. No one would have thought that he would leave his attendants and convoy behind and travel lightly to Lan City. Hearing him say this, Gu Zicheng also laughed. The Lian family was also a wealthy and influential family in Great Xia. They had stood tall for hundreds of years and produced talented people in every generation. However, this generation of youngsters was indeed good for nothing. However, I am really interested in this deputy Ren. The 7th prince smiled. I don't know much either. I have heard that this person was sent to prison more than a month ago. After that, he was brought out to stay in the Beast Park for some time, and became the Honglu deputy. Before that, no one knew anything about him. Speaking of which, it is really weird. The 7th prince squinted his eyes slightly. Suddenly, a person like this popped out from a rock. He spoke softly and then laughed. If Renbachian saw the 7th prince at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. This was because other than his hairstyle and temperament, the 7th prince's face was exactly the same as his. There was almost no difference, as if they were carved from the same mold. When the 7th prince saw Renbachian from afar, he felt this way. Therefore, Renbachian's current position in his heart was second only to the purpose of his visit to Dayo. A person who looked exactly like him made him feel a little weird. It was enough to have one person in this world. There was no need for another person who looked exactly like him. Chapter 84. Renbachian naturally did not know what was happening in other places. From that day onwards he started to get busy. He could not even care about the air coolers anymore. After Tong Jia made the outer shell, he threw it to caretaker Shi. As for the price, it was 15 taels of silver each. Anyway, the people who bought it weren't ordinary people. It didn't matter if it was expensive. The production method of this thing was too simple. It could only earn a sum of money. As long as it was sold, there would definitely be imitations. Although Dayo people weren't good at doing business, they weren't stupid. They just needed to find someone to make this thing. Almost all the money was under their feet. They would at least know how to bend their backs. Even if Dayo people were really stupid, there were still merchants from other countries. Renbaqian's mind wasn't on this. Although a few hundred taels of silver wasn't a small amount, it wasn't very important to him. What he didn't know was that when caretaker Shi placed this thing in the newly renovated shop on Jingyang Avenue, it immediately attracted the interest of many people, especially after it was demonstrated that it could produce cold air with ice cubes. Out of a total of 20 air coolers, 7 were sold on the first day. The remaining 13 were completely sold the next day. It was much faster than what Renbaqian initially expected. In fact, there was one thing that he didn't know. Ever since the Empress gave the air coolers to the Empress, she often used them even during court sessions. The other officials had long been envious of them. When the air coolers were placed in the shop, they were immediately sold out after being discovered. 20 air coolers earned more than 200 taels of silver. Caretaker Shi's eyes immediately turned red, and he hurriedly looked for Renbaqian. Upon hearing this news, Renbaqian was somewhat surprised. He already knew that the air coolers would definitely be sold. However, he didn't expect them to be sold out so quickly. He asked caretaker Shi to go to the previous shop and order another 100 air coolers. He reckoned that they would still be able to catch up with the sales. After leaving the matter to caretaker Shi, Renbaqian continued to deal with the affairs of the Honglu Bureau. As the day of the Empress's birthday approached, more and more people arrived in Lan City. Many of them were originally from families with businesses in Dayo. As their own caravans frequently came and went, they were very accurate with their timing. Usually they would arrive about a week in advance. At this point in time, there were already more than 70 batches of people arriving in Lan City. Most of them came in convoy after convoy. Other than the gifts and people that were to celebrate the Empress's birthday, there were also a large number of goods. The Empress's birthday celebration was in a week's time. Renbaqian reckoned that there would be a lot of people coming during these last few days. After a while, he would be able to get rid of this stall. Renbaqian put down his brush, stretched himself and yawned. These days, he was indeed a little busy. After all, things were different from before. Nowadays, he had to make decisions on many matters, arrange personnel, and even mediate disputes. Just as he had thought, none of the people who could come here were ordinary people, and none of them were kind. They were all used to being domineering in their own homes. What are you looking at? What's wrong with looking at you? What do you think? Cut you up. Charge. Almost 9 out of 10 disputes started with something like this. There were many powerful people in this world, and Renbaqian had met a few of them recently. However, all kinds of arrogant and despotic young masters who were originally at home fighting chickens and walking dogs couldn't change their behavior when they came here. Even in China, a place with advanced information technology, there were many of such people, let alone in a feudal society. Basically, they only wandered around within 100 miles of their homes. Even though they had learned a lesson from the mistakes of others, they couldn't care less when they were hot-blooded. These few days, Renbaqian hanged 3 people to death. They were hanged alive. Xiongpai wrapped a rope around their necks and lifted them up. The 3 people started to struggle continuously until they finally breathed their last. Such a way of handling things gave many hot-blooded young masters a huge shock. It made them feel like they had seen a ghost when they saw Renbaqian. Renbaqian's methods were really too ruthless, but he still had a good-natured look on his face at all times. Even when he was ordering people to kill, his expression didn't change at all. It was not uncommon for them to kill people, and some of them had even done it with their own hands. However, Renbaqian's behavior still made them feel a chill in their hearts, especially when there was a monster like Xiongpai behind him. After a few times of this, no matter what happened, As long as Renbaqian and Xiongpai stood there, everyone would immediately scatter like birds and beasts. What had happened in the past few days had spread throughout Lan City. Many people knew that the Honglu Bureau had an additional deputy who looked gentle, but was actually cruel and merciless. As for those young masters from the other 3 countries, they hated Renbaqian to death, and wished they could slice him to death with a knife. They had thought about how they would deal with Renbaqian if he fell into their hands. If it was really as they thought, it would be hard for Renbaqian to die if he fell into their hands. However, they had no choice but to lower their heads now that they were under the eaves. At this moment, these young masters knew that Renbaqian was at least more powerful than them in Lan City. They couldn't help but be convinced. In the past, during the Empress's birthday celebrations, there would always be people who caused a lot of trouble. However, this year, there were much fewer. Even the Public Order Bureau was very surprised. In a village on a mountain that was a day's journey away from Lan City, Qiji was carving a puppet with a small knife. Not long after, he heard a commotion at the entrance. A burly man rode a horse into the village and jumped off. He strode toward Qiji and said, "Rascal, you are very carefree here." Qiji immediately laughed and said, "It's much more comfortable than dealing with those bastards. I finally don't have to see those bastards this year. In my opinion, Her Majesty might as well throw me into the army. I will be more comfortable there." "Who asked you to lose that time?" Qiji's face immediately turned black when he heard that burly man's words. "How's the Honglu Bureau? That rascal hasn't been tormented to death by those people, right?" Qiji changed the topic. That burly man's expression immediately became a little strange when he heard this. "What's wrong?" Qiji asked curiously when he saw his expression. "Hehe, that bunch of fellows are like mice seeing a cat when they see that rascal now." Qiji's curiosity was immediately piqued when he heard this. "What's going on? When I was around, those bastards never behaved themselves. They gave me trouble every day and couldn't wait to strangle each and every one of them to death." That burly man laughed and told him some of the things he knew. "Those bastards are all scared to death. Every one of them is scared to death when they see him. As long as he stands there, they don't even need to say a word. No matter what dispute there is, they will just turn around and leave." Qiji touched his short stubble and scolded, "Damn it, I broke 4 people's legs last year, but that bunch of fellows didn't even take it seriously. They really think that I am easy to bully. Next year, if there is any more trouble, I will just kill them. If not for the fact that they were gifts to Her Majesty, do you think I won't kill them?" That burly man laughed again, and then shook his head. "You can't scare them. You are just a little unreasonable and tyrannical, and you kill people cleanly. But that rascal is different. He is like a snake. I didn't see it live, but I heard them say that the rascal had a smile on his face and asked Xiongpai to put a rope around the necks of the people and hang them to death. He just used a big knife to chop them. There is nothing scary about that. He's smiling at you, asking about your well-being, and stabbing you with a knife. That's how scary it is." Qiji threw the knife in his hand forward and stabbed it into a wooden board. He seemed to feel aggrieved that he was actually not as good as that weak rascal. "Damn it, I originally thought that the rascal would be tortured badly, and wondered why Her Majesty didn't send someone more powerful. I didn't expect him to be so powerful." Qiji scolded, and then slapped the burly man's leg. "But who did you learn this from?" "The people from the Chun nation said it. I learned it from them," the burly man said with a smile. Chapter 85. When it was almost night time, Renbaqian was summoned to the palace. Once he entered the palace, he saw the Empress dressed in red muslin standing in front of a table. On top of the table was a painting. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Renbaqian greeted. The Empress turned around and sized up Renbaqian. Then she nodded her head and said, "I haven't seen you for a few days. You look more like you now. Since I am working for Her Majesty, I have to look presentable. Otherwise, I will embarrass Her Majesty," Renbaqian said. "Well said and well done," the Empress praised. "As long as Your Majesty doesn't blame me for acting rashly. If you were afraid, You would have come to beg for forgiveness long ago. The Empress curled her lips. These days, I have been wholeheartedly thinking about completing the task your Majesty has given me. How could I care about anything else? Even if your Majesty really wants to blame me, I have to settle the matter first, Rinpoche quickly said. Once again, the Empress shifted her gaze from the painting to Rinpoche. If you are telling the truth, I will be very happy. Of course it's the truth. I don't dare to hide anything from His Majesty. I will speak my mind. The Empress was non-committal. She would be a fool if she believed everything that Rinpoche said. Rinpoche was naturally aware of this. However, no matter how many times he tried to flatter someone, flattering them more and showing his loyalty would always bring him a lot of benefits. It was just a few words, nothing more. He felt that if he had been as smart and quick-witted as he was now, he wouldn't have been so miserable. The Empress turned around and returned to her couch. She stretched out her palm, and Hong Wuan immediately poured a cup of wine and placed it in her hand. This wasn't the first time Rinpoche had seen such a scene. He had always been curious about how Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan knew when the Empress wanted something. Furthermore, looking at the Empress's expression, their every move was exactly what she wanted. It can't be a roundworm in my stomach, right? However, this ability was what he was striving for. Although no one has reported you these 2 days, they will probably come when the time comes. What do you think I should do? Although you did a good job, they were all gifts for me. If I let them go out with a belly full of complaints, it would be inexcusable. But we don't want to punish you. After all, you're working for us, and what you're doing is to our liking. Tell me, what should I do? When Rinpoche heard what the Empress said, his mind spun. There seemed to be only one path in front of him. Admit your guilt and accept the punishment. Even though the Empress wouldn't really punish him, and was just saying it to test his thoughts, Rinpoche knew that the Empress wouldn't punish him. If she were to be punished, the Empress would lose face. He worked for her, but in the end he had to take the blame. When had the Emperor of Dayo ever done such a thing? Dayo had always given people the impression of being rude and overbearing. He had never cared about what others thought. Rinpoche raised his head and said to the Empress, "With your Majesty's dignity, why would you care about the opinions of others, let alone those thieves and rascals? Will His Majesty give them an explanation?" After hearing Rinpoche's reply, the Empress revealed a smile on her face. Soon after, she burst into unbridled laughter. Her red lips were on fire. At this moment, the feeling that the Empress gave him was like a ball of flame, unbridled and flamboyant. Hong Wuan, give storyteller Ren a glass of wine. Rinpoche gulped down the wine in her cup and laughed heartily. Rinpoche took the wine cup. Just by smelling it, he knew that it was strong wine. He raised the cup with both hands and said, "Thank you for the wine, Your Majesty." After finishing his sentence, he drank the wine in one gulp. A scorching heat flowed into his stomach. Well said. Why would I care about the opinions of others when I do things? The Empress praised. Your Majesty is well versed in both literature and martial arts. No matter what you do, you have your own limits. Naturally, you don't need to care about what others think or say. Rinpoche knew that his words had touched the Empress's heart. He immediately struck while the iron was hot. After the Empress laughed out loud, she raised another cup of wine and poured it into her mouth. There are 4 more days before the great hunt. Inform them that they can bring along a follower. Report the name list in 2 days. Rinpoche was slightly stunned. Great hunt? He had never heard of this before. When the time comes, you have to perform well and don't embarrass me. All right, you can leave now. Yes, Your Majesty. Rinpoche pondered as he left the palace. What was going on with this great hunt? Furthermore, Her Majesty wanted him to participate. It seemed like he had to find someone to ask. After returning to the Beast Park, Rinpoche immediately went to look for Caretaker Sher. He saw Caretaker Sher holding a stone padlock at the entrance of the house, and moving it up and down. No wonder Caretaker Sher had muscles all over his body. Rinpoche usually did not pay attention to them. Caretaker Sher was also training his muscles every day. Sure enough, muscles were trained, not nurtured. When Caretaker Sher saw Rinpoche, he threw the stone padlock to the side and laughed. I'm getting old, but I'm not as strong as before. If it was 10 years ago, I wouldn't even need to exert any strength to do this. At this moment, caretaker Sure was sweating profusely and panting a little. Sometimes, when Renbachian looked at these aboriginals, he felt that it was time for him to train. However, after thinking about it, even if he became a muscle maniac, he wouldn't be able to withstand a slap. If there was an opportunity, it would be better to get some martial arts manuals from this world. At least he wouldn't be too weak to fight a chicken. How's the matter with the air cooler? Renbachian asked. We have produced 30 air coolers in the past few days, and sold more than 20 of them. The remaining ones will probably be sold tomorrow. Caretaker Sure was excited when he mentioned this. Renbachian nodded his head. He estimated that it was about time. A total of more than 40 air coolers had been sold. There should be imitations soon. However, with so many young masters coming over recently, if they knew about this air cooler, they would not be stingy to buy one. It should be able to sell for a while. This air cooler should be able to earn at least 1,000 taels of silver. Caretaker Sure, I have something to ask. What's the great hunt? Renbachian changed the topic to the autumn hunt. It's almost time. Caretaker Sure immediately replied after hearing Renbachian's question. It's a custom. Every year on this day, people would carry a bow and knife and go hunting in the mountains. The more prey they have, the better their lives will be in the coming year. Furthermore, if they manage to hunt prey like the sharp-toothed tiger, they will be favored by the ladies back in the stronghold. It's also held in Lan City. It's mainly held in the stronghold. However, Her Majesty will hold it once every year. The children of various influential families will participate in it to display their individual strength. Some who have grudges will also compete with each other during this time. In previous year's Great Hunt, did those who came to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday also participate? Of course. The youngsters of the Aboriginals are not as weak as them. We have to make them understand this point. Caretaker Sure replied as a matter of course. Renbachian was enlightened. It turned out that the purpose of displaying one's strength was to let other nations see how brave the youngsters of Dayo were. This way, they would naturally feel a sense of fear in their hearts. When they returned and told others, their reputation would naturally spread. Soon after, Renbachian's face turned green. Chapter 86. After inquiring about the great hunt from Caretaker Sure, Renbachian had a rough idea of what to do. The autumn hunt was originally a custom of the Aboriginals. Now that the city was built, many commoners did not have such conditions. However, it was still held once a year. Those who participated were the sons and daughters of the court officials. They were able to show off their strength in front of the Empress. The Empress could also observe whether there were outstanding youths from various families through the autumn hunt. At the same time, the Empress would always invite the envoys from various countries to participate in the autumn hunt to let them see the strength of the Aboriginals' youths. After that, the news would naturally spread back to the various countries. This had already become a routine. After the Empress came to power, in addition to inviting the envoys from various countries, she would also invite the youths from various countries who came to send gifts to participate. This was also a form of deterrence and display of strength, because many of these youths would be in power in the future. It gave them a direct impression of the valiant strength of the Aboriginals, and also spread the news through their mouths. The hunting location was a forest that was half a day's journey away from Lan City. There were many wild beasts there, and many of them were even more ferocious. This was a stage for everyone to display their abilities. Almost every year, the person with the best results would receive more attention and a better path to promotion. At the same time, their performance during the hunt would also attract the attention of many young ladies. As a result, everyone who participated in the hunt was full of energy. However, Renbachian's mind was filled with bad thoughts. According to Caretaker Sure, hunting on the mountain wasn't for hunting rabbits. Instead, it was for the individual. If he went, he would not know how to use knives, spears, rods, bows and arrows. Not to mention hunting, it would be good if he did not get beaten up by the prey. Those young masters had servants, but he didn't. Furthermore, it was a rabbit. If it was a rabbit with a mouthful of fangs like those in the beast park, Renbachyan felt that he would not be able to defeat it. Wasn't it making things difficult for him to hunt with those humanoid Gundams who demolished houses with their bare hands? The matter of the beast wasn't what Renbachyan was most worried about. Instead, he was most worried about the humans. These days he had offended many people in the Honglu Bureau. Initially he thought that they couldn't do anything to him. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. If someone were to plot against him on the mountain, he would probably have to pay for his 50 kilograms of meat before he even encountered the beast. This was simply a scam. After thinking about it, Renbachyan cursed. Damn it. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so ruthless. Now there were more than 1 or 2 people who wanted to chew his bones and swallow them. Since they had already come this far, there was no point in thinking too much. Unless, when the time came, he would hug the Empress's thigh and become her pendant. He would rather die than go up the mountain, even though he really wanted to do that. Needless to say, he had to go back and get a gun. Even if he brought 2 guns for self-defense, he might not be safe. But without a gun to defend himself, he was definitely not safe. Not only could a gun be used to deal with ferocious beasts, but it could also be used to deal with people. Calculating the time, he had to return to Earth tomorrow night. It seemed that he had to settle the matter of notifying the young masters of the other 3 nations and submit the name list. If someone else came after he left, he would let someone else handle it. The Empress would definitely understand. One day after the Great Hunt, he would return to Earth. When he returned, it would be just in time to attend the Empress's birthday celebration. Early the next morning, Renbachyan arrived at the Honglu Bureau to arrange for someone to inform them about the Great Hunt. Not long after he sat down, someone came to report that someone of high status had arrived. It was the 7th Prince of Great Xia. Currently, Great Xia was the most powerful nation that Renbachyan knew of. Whether in terms of land area or population, its land area was 3 times that of Daeyo's. Its population was even more. It had more than 200 million people, which was close to 3 times the population. In a feudal world, this was already rather terrifying. With a large population, there were also many experts. It was said that 6 of the top 10 experts in the world were in Great Xia. Furthermore, Great Xia had a long history of culture. Every nation was deeply influenced by Great Xia, especially the Yun nation and the Chun nation, which were originally of the same origin as Great Xia. They were even more affected. In various senses, Great Xia was currently the hegemon of this world that Renbachyan knew of. With the arrival of the 7th prince of such a nation, Renbachyan really couldn't neglect him. He hurriedly brought Xiongpai out. There was a large group of people and horses outside the door. Hundreds of armored and murderous knights were standing in front of the Honglu temple. Behind these knights was a large luxurious carriage. 6 extremely tall horses were pulling the carriage. They were half a head taller than the other horses. Their entire bodies were covered with satin-like fur and looked extremely spirited. Just by looking at these 6 horses, one could tell that they were definitely priceless. If any of them were to be placed in the hands of others, they would probably be treated as treasures. However, at this moment they were being used to pull the carriage. Inevitably, one couldn't help but feel that it was a waste of God's gifts. Renbachyan stood in front of the Honglu temple and didn't continue to walk forward. The other party was the 7th prince of Great Xia, but he was an official of Daeyo. Coming out to welcome him was already sufficient etiquette. In fact, other than the people who came out to take a look at the beginning, the people who arrived later on were directly brought into the Honglu temple. As such, Renbachyan felt that standing in front of the door to welcome him was already sufficient. There was no need to eagerly run to the front to welcome him. After all, he wouldn't be paid by Daeyo. However, what made him feel strange was that these knights looked at him strangely. Although it seemed that their strict discipline allowed them to control themselves, the shocked expressions on their faces couldn't be concealed at all. Why are they looking at me? Because I'm handsome? I'm not that handsome to such a tragic extent, right? Renbachyan touched his face. He couldn't figure out what was going on with those people's gazes. He could only pretend that he didn't see them, and continued to wait at the door. After standing in front of the door for 2 minutes, Renbachian was getting more and more impatient. Just as he was considering whether to turn around and go back, a man on a horse ran to the front and gave the order. Soon after, hundreds of knights started to move forward slowly. The carriage got closer and closer to Renbachian, until it stopped in front of the door. Just now from afar, he already felt that this carriage looked extremely luxurious. When it was right in front of him, and he saw the gold inlaid patterns and inlaid gems, Renbachian really wanted to find a camera and take a picture of this carriage. What was a luxurious carriage? This was it. The body of the carriage was built with an unknown purple wood. Mountains, rivers, and clouds were first carved on it. Then, a pattern of flying cranes was inlaid with gold. It was vivid and lifelike. The eyes and crown of the cranes were inlaid with gems. As the light flowed, they were filled with spirituality. It was as if they could fly out from the walls of the carriage in the next second. This carriage looked more like an exquisite piece of art than a means of transportation. As the carriage stopped, a pair of hands reached out from inside the carriage. The curtains were pulled open, and the first person to come out was a stunning lady dressed in pink. Following her was a young man dressed in a white robe and a white jade crown on his head. When Renbachian saw this young man's face, he was stunned. It was as if he was looking at himself in the mirror. His facial features were exactly the same. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. Renbachian had never thought that there would actually be such a person in the world who looked exactly like him. Moreover, he was the 7th prince of Great Xia. Chapter 87. Renbachian didn't know why he had such an impulse, but this feeling came from the bottom of his heart. It was as if it was the deepest desire and impulse in his heart. If he killed this person who looked exactly like him, then he would be the only one left. Renbachian didn't know if the other party had the same thoughts as him. He suppressed the killing intent in his heart, cupped his fists and asked, "Are you the 7th prince of Great Xia?" Renbachian didn't dare to reveal even the slightest bit of killing intent in his heart. It was too easy for such a person to kill him. "That's me." The 7th prince suppressed the killing intent in his heart, and showed an appropriate expression of surprise before nodding slowly. At this moment, the two of them had a murderous intent towards each other, but they concealed it very well. The only difference was that this was the second time the 7th prince had seen Renbachian. 7th prince walked in front of Renbachian and faced him. Everyone in the surroundings looked at the two of them in a daze. Who would have thought that there would be two people so similar in this world? More than one person suspected that the 7th prince had a twin brother. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely that such a thing would happen. "I really feel that I'm looking at myself," the 7th prince exclaimed softly after sizing up Renbachian. "This world is really mysterious. Xiaowu, don't you agree?" The 7th prince's words were directed at the beautiful woman. The woman came to the 7th prince's side and looked at the two of them. She gently covered her mouth and appropriately revealed a shocked expression. Renbachian pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He also felt that it was very mystical that there was actually someone different from him in another world. "In the future, you and I should get to know each other better." The 7th prince patted Renbachian's shoulder and seemed to be very happy. However, Renbachian didn't believe this nonsense. One would be a fool to believe him. If he was the 7th prince and saw someone who looked exactly like him, he would only have two thoughts. One was to kill him, and the other was to keep him by his side as a substitute so that he could use him as a shield at a critical moment. He was now an official of Dayo. Not to mention his position as the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, he was still a secondary class, rank 6 Honglu deputy. The second option was very difficult to achieve, so there was only one option left, and that was to kill him. This was what Renbachian understood at this moment. Back then, he was able to have such an impulse in his heart, so how could a person of his status tolerate someone who looked exactly like him living in the outside world? Very soon, Renbachian laughed and said, "I didn't expect that I would actually look like the Prince of Great Xia. This world is really magical." Perhaps in some corner of this world, there are people who look exactly the same. The 7th prince narrowed his eyes slightly. If someone else had said this in the past, he wouldn't have believed it. But now he believed it. Your Highness, please follow me. Although His Highness should be addressed as such, right? Although Your Highness has a distinguished status, there are still some procedures that must be followed, Renbachian said as he walked in. When everyone went in, the people outside were still in disbelief. Qi Heng and Qi Sheng also smacked their lips in surprise. They didn't expect such a coincidence to happen. He could brag about this when he got back. The seventh prince's subordinates were even more surprised than the two of them. Following the seventh prince, the woman called Xiao Wu and a person who looked like the commander of the cavalry followed. On the way into the courtyard, the seventh prince was still marveling at the wonders of this world. He casually asked, "Where is Deputy Ren's ancestral home? Maybe it's also Great Xia. Or maybe it's a descendant of the royal family. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to imagine that there's anyone in this world who doesn't have any blood relations with me." When Renbachian heard this, he thought to himself that if he wasn't from Earth, he might really believe it. But he said, "I'm not worthy to be associated with you. My ancestors were commoners in the marketplace, and didn't even have an official." The seventh prince turned his head to look at Renbachian, and then turned his head away as if nothing had happened. Xiao Wu, who was beside him, frowned. Just now, the seventh prince grabbed her hand very forcefully, and it hurt her a little. But very quickly, she intimately held onto the seventh prince's hand and transmitted the warmth of her palm to him. Looking at Xiao Wu bending over the table and filling out a piece of paper, Renbachian recalled the Empress's instructions and said, "The annual Great Hunt will be held in a few days. I wonder if the seventh prince is interested? I really want to see the young generation of Dayo." The seventh prince laughed. "But before that, I would like to request Deputy to pass on the message that I would like to meet the Empress of your country." Renbachian nodded his head. "I will report to Her Majesty. I don't know if Her Majesty will meet me. In addition, there will be someone to inform Your Highness about the time and location of the Great Hunt." The seventh prince nodded his head. "Deputy Ren, if you have time, I would like to have a drink with you. I hope you won't decline." Renbachian laughed. "Recently, I've been rather busy and I can't leave. If there's a chance in the future, I will definitely pay you a visit." Seeing that Renbachian rejected him, the seventh prince didn't say anything else. After Xiao Wu finished filling out the paper, he brought his men and left. Renbachian didn't send him off. After the seventh prince left, he sat down on the chair and panted heavily. Just now, he simply couldn't suppress the murderous intent in his heart. He even had the urge to let Xiongpai pinch him to death. However, he didn't dare to do so. He didn't know if Xiongpai would die, but he knew that he was definitely going to die. Furthermore, he wouldn't believe that the Prince of Great Xia didn't have a few experts by his side. At this moment, Xiongpai had a blank look on his face. "Deputy, he looks so much like you. If we were outside, I definitely wouldn't be able to recognize you." Renbachian ignored him. Not to mention Xiongpai. Even he himself wouldn't be able to recognize him. After the seventh prince left, the boiling murderous intent in his heart finally calmed down. Even he himself felt strange as to why he would have such a reaction when he saw the seventh prince. Before he came to this world, he didn't even kill a chicken. Although he had let Xiongpai kill a few people these days, it was all for the purpose of intimidating others. He didn't feel comfortable in his heart. And this was the first time he had such a murderous intent toward a stranger. After sitting behind the table in a daze for a while, Renbachian suddenly thought of a movie that he had watched before. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds, and every version of himself had different encounters. He always felt that this seventh prince was a different version of himself in a different world. Under some kind of coincidence, he came to this world and met the version of himself in this world. Although this idea wasn't reliable, he felt that it wasn't impossible. Otherwise, he couldn't explain the murderous intent in his heart just now. In the movie, every time he killed himself, he would become stronger. According to Renbachian's understanding, the same origin would be divided into countless parts. After killing the version of himself in another world, he would obtain the origin of the other party and become stronger. Of course, this was just a delusion in the movie world. Chapter 88. What would happen if the seventh prince really died? Was there such a thing as an origin in this world? Would he absorb his origin? Was he really the Renbachian from another world? When these thoughts appeared in Renbachian's mind, it was as if he was holding a Pandora's box in his hand, constantly tempting him. However, he didn't dare to do so. Even those who were trampled or hanged to death by his order were the trusted aides or stewards of those young masters. Although he appeared to be ruthless, he knew what he could do and what he couldn't. With the identity of the seventh prince, he really didn't dare to do so. If he died here, it would be like a president of a big country dying in China. The impact would be too great. It would be like slapping the face of the great Xia imperial family and spitting on them. The other party didn't need any evidence. As long as there was a little doubt, they could send someone to kill him. Not to mention whether the Empress would protect him. Even if she wanted to, unless he never left the palace, the other party could just send an expert. Renbachian rubbed his forehead and suppressed this thought. He had to settle the matter that the Empress had instructed him to do. It was better to keep the matter of the seventh prince at the bottom of his heart. However, Renbachian raised his vigilance. If he had such an impulse, what about the other party? Would he be the same as him? If the other party had such thoughts, given his identity, he wouldn't have to worry about this and that. Then he would be in danger. That afternoon, all the people who had arrived to participate in the Great Hunt had been counted. Everyone was going to participate. Unlike Renbachian, the others already knew about the Great Hunt. They had rushed to Lan City before the Great Hunt, and naturally had the intention to participate. In any case, each of them could bring an attendant. After all, the people from other countries weren't as skilled as the aboriginals. Even if those heirs were skilled in martial arts, they still needed a helper who could help them carry their prey. This was the difference between them and Renbachian. Although Renbachian wasn't an aboriginal, he didn't have such preferential treatment. While counting the number of people, Renbachian put aside his thoughts and went to look for Gu Daxiong. After all, he needed a mount to go hunting. Not to mention riding a horse, Renbachian hadn't even touched one before. Even if it was a last-minute effort, he had to think of a way. Gu Daxiong was snoring in his room when he was woken up by Renbachian. He scolded Renbachian discontentedly. After hearing the purpose of Renbachian's visit, he laughed and said, "You can take away the ones you like in the backyard." "Thank you very much, Sir Gu." Renbachian cupped his hands in thanks, and went straight to the backyard. Generally speaking, people in ancient times would refer to a cow pen or a horse pen. However, Gu Daxiong only referred to a pen. After Renbachian went over and took a look, he understood why. The only thing missing was a horse. Speaking of which, there were relatively few horses in Dayo. Most of them were cattle and sheep. It was the same in this enclosure. There were a few sheep, the kind that pulled carts on the streets. They were huge and about the same size as horses. There were also a few cows that looked more docile, and they had curved and spiral horns. It was unknown what the difference was. The spiral-horned cows were greenish in color, and their bodies were thinner. In addition, there were two giant birds not far away. Their feathers were yellowish-brown. They looked a little like ostriches, but their heads were much bigger than ostriches. Their beaks were wider, and their necks were thicker. There was a faint stench on their bodies. Even though it wasn't very strong, it was very disgusting. Renbachian couldn't help but cover his nose. "Are these things used to be ridden?" Renbachian curiously asked the person in charge. "Sir, these are mountain-gazing birds. They run extremely fast, especially when crossing mountains and rivers. They are much faster than other animals. They are usually used to deliver letters." The person in charge of these animals immediately said. Renbachian curiously looked at the two mountain-gazing birds a few more times before asking, "What kind of mount is better for me to ride when I go hunting?" "It must be docile and easy to control." The first is the mountain-gazing bird. It can be ridden on mountains and can jump up rocks that aren't tall. The second is the crooked cow. It's fast and can carry things, but it's not as convenient as the mountain-gazing bird, the person in charge said. Renbachian followed the direction of his finger and looked at the two crooked cows with spiral-shaped horns. Then he looked at the mountain birds. He preferred crooked cows as their backs were wider, making them more comfortable to ride on. Furthermore, they could carry things. Although the mountain-gazing bird could run and jump in the mountains, according to caretaker Sure, there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. If they were to encounter ferocious beasts while riding on this bird, they might not be able to react in time. It would be safer for him to walk slowly on his own two legs. It wasn't that the crooked cow couldn't climb the mountain, but it wasn't as easy as the mountain-gazing bird. The main problem was the mountain-gazing bird's stench. If he kept riding it, it would be a torture. "Bring this crooked cow out for me to try," Rinpoche said. "All right." The person in charge opened the wooden fence and pulled out a crooked cow. Then he took a saddle from the side and put it on. After that, he held the rope and said to Rinpoche, "Sir, please." The crooked cow's back was about 1.3 meters above the ground. Rinpoche took a deep breath, grabbed the saddle, and climbed up. This crooked cow was rather well behaved and didn't move at all when Rinpoche was crawling on the net. After Rinpoche was seated properly, the person in charge passed the rope to him and told him how to operate it. "Go." Rinpoche's calf knocked on the cow's stomach, and the cow immediately moved forward. The reins were attached to the cow's face, and it was similar to a horse's. The way to control it was similar as well. In addition, the crooked cow was docile, so it was easy to control. However, once the crooked cow started to run, Rinpoche had to protect its body for fear that it would fall. Not long after, Rinpoche started to feel uncomfortable all over his body. The speed of this crooked cow wasn't considered slow, but it was too bumpy. Furthermore, it was swaying left and right, making Rinpoche feel motion sickness. Rinpoche hurriedly stopped the crooked cow and jumped onto the ground to rest. "Is this the most stable one?" Rinpoche asked. "The mountain-gazing bird is more stable than the crooked cow. Sir, you can give it a try." Seeing this, Rinpoche had no choice but to let the person in charge bring out the mountain-gazing bird. The mountain-gazing bird was also very docile, or it could be said that it had been tamed. Rinpoche stroked its feathers first. The mountain-gazing bird let out a gee sound and turned its head to look at Rinpoche. "Sir, you can stroke its head first. It likes to do that," the person in charge said. Rinpoche placed his hand on the mountain-gazing bird's head, and it let out a gee sound again. At the same time, its eyes squinted slightly. It looked very comfortable, no different from a cat or dog that was begging to be stroked. After he climbed onto the back of the mountain-gazing bird and ran for a while, he realized that even though this thing didn't look very eye-catching, it was indeed much more comfortable than riding the crooked cow. The feathers on its body were also softer, and it didn't chafe the inner thighs. The only drawback was the faint stench that kept drilling into his nose. "Are all these things so smelly?" Rinpoche asked. "Yes, this thing relies on its stench to make other wild beasts not like to treat it as prey," the person in charge said. Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows for a long time. All right, this thing was a little smelly, but it was indeed comfortable to ride. If he were to ride the crooked cow, he reckoned that he would collapse before he even reached his destination. If it was a little smelly, so be it. He would bear with it. At most, he would bring 2 bottles of perfume and spray it on when he returned from Earth. Chapter 89. Rinpoche opened his eyes, looked at the familiar roof, and stared blankly for a long time. In the novels, one would never come back after transmigrating, or one could wear whatever they wanted. Going through this torment every few days really gave him a headache. He was lucky this time that the Empress's birthday celebration and the Great Hunt happened to coincide with his time in that world. However, he couldn't be so lucky every time. It would be troublesome if he happened to return to Earth for some important matter. He really wished that he could control his transmigration back and forth. That would be much safer. After thinking about it, Rinpoche felt that he should install a camera. Since he couldn't find the reason for his transmigration from his body, he would record it to see how he transmigrated. Perhaps he could find some clues. He sat up from his bed and opened the window. It was even colder outside, and a gust of cold air hit him in the face. There was some snow outside the windowsill. It seemed that it had just snowed, probably last night. It was already November. It had been more than 4 months since he arrived in that world. However, only 2 months had passed in Renbachian's body, and this was when the time on Earth and in the other world were added together. Renbachian felt that if this continued, his lifespan would follow his body's time. Others had lived for 10 years, but his body had only lived for 5 years. However, in that world, others had lived for 4 years, but his body had lived for 6 years. In a short period of time, there wasn't much of a difference, but as time passed, it would gradually become apparent. He wandered between 2 worlds, but he was different from the people in both worlds. This was the biggest problem with time not synchronizing. However, this was only a guess. It would probably take a long time for him to verify whether this guess was true or not. Now it was time to prepare the things that he needed. This great hunt was a huge trap for him. If he didn't handle it well, he might not have a future. If the 7th prince had the same thoughts when he saw Renbachian, he wouldn't have as many misgivings as Renbachian. There were also those sons of nobles who couldn't wait to eat him alive. In addition, there were all kinds of ferocious beasts in the mountain range. Renbachian felt that to others, this was just a stage for them to showcase themselves, have fun, or observe others. To him, however, it was a huge trap where he could lose his life at any time. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he was being overly sensitive. If there were aboriginals around, no one would dare to make a move on him. However, he didn't know much about the Great Hunt. It was better for him to be fully prepared. It would be best if he could get closer to some of the aboriginals in the future. This way, he would be safer. However, the Empress wouldn't be able to keep her promise to not embarrass herself. However, Renbachian felt that his life was more important. If he had a choice, he would rather hug the Empress's thigh than go up the mountain. He just didn't know if the Empress would kick him up the mountain. At the very least, she told him not to embarrass himself. She definitely didn't want him to hug her thigh at the foot of the mountain. First, he searched the internet for the things he needed and confirmed what he wanted. First was a crossbow. This thing was perfect for hunting in the mountains. Moreover, it was silent, so it wouldn't attract other people. The crossbow might not be as powerful as some bows and arrows, but even if he was given a composite bow, he still wouldn't be able to hit it. There were still 3 days left, and Renbachian didn't think that he could master archery in such a short period of time. Next was the gun, which was one of the most common killing weapons in modern times. It was also more powerful than a crossbow. Renbachian prepared to get one for self-defense. If possible, Renbachian also wanted to get 2 grenades or something. If he really met with an accident, he could throw these grenades at the other party. Even if they didn't kill him, they could still injure him. At the very least, they could scare him and make it easier for him to escape. These were the main things he needed. There were still some other miscellaneous things. According to what Renbachian knew, they still had to camp for the night. There would always be some small things that could be used. For example, sleeping bags, various seasoning boxes, and a military knife. Renbachian didn't have the means to buy guns and crossbows. Even though there was a phone number for selling guns written on the door of the toilet at the bus terminal, it was written so openly that the police would think that they were blind. Renbachian still felt that it wasn't reliable. If he was lucky, they would sell him a BB gun. If he was unlucky, they would sell him a water gun. These were all tricks. It was better not to find trouble for himself. He was afraid that he would have to look for Chengqing for these things. In any case, he was a young master. Renbachian believed that he would definitely be able to find someone to get them. Renbachian heated up a bag of milk in the fridge with the microwave and ate his breakfast with biscuits. Then he picked up his phone and gave Chengqing a call. "I say, did something happen to you recently? I couldn't find you." "Sure enough, men become bad when they get rich. Are you afraid that I will disturb you?" Hearing Chengqing's voice, Renbachian laughed. He was intentionally distancing himself from Chengqing, and Chengqing must have felt it. He had no choice. He was afraid that Chengqing would find out about his secret. After all, his disappearance and reappearance were too regular. It would always make people feel that something was wrong. "Is that why you are so bad?" Renbachian laughed. "That was in the past. I have turned over a new leaf now." Chun-Ching immediately said. Are you free in the afternoon? Let's have a meal together? Sure, send me the address. Jiangnan was talking about you yesterday, Chun-Ching immediately said. All right, you go ahead with your work. Renbaqian hung up the phone and noticed that he had received a few messages. He opened them and saw that one was sent by an unknown number 2 days ago. This is Enfei. I am getting my salary from my new job. When are you free? I will treat you to a meal as a form of gratitude. Enfei? Renbaqian's first reaction was that he had sent the message to the wrong person. Then he suddenly thought of the girl who was wearing a hearing aid but was very confident in finding a job. He closed the message and looked at his WeChat. Dong Haiqing had sent him a message. Young Master Ren, it seems like you don't like your old classmate anymore. A strong sense of resentment and dissatisfaction was transmitted through the screen of the phone. Below her was a message from Qinbing. I haven't been able to contact you since the gathering. Did something happen? Renbaqian shook his head. Let them think whatever they want. At that time, he had just entered the other world, and was still in the mood to contact his old classmate. However, after such a long time, Renbaqian always felt that the other world was the main world. He didn't care about many things on Earth anymore. Of course, this was also because Renbaqian's thoughts were always on how to preserve his life and climb up. After a long time, it seemed that the other world was the important one. On Earth, as long as one had money, one wouldn't starve to death. There was nothing to worry about. Renbaqian continued to scroll through WeChat. His parents were still posting things like the way to maintain good health, the secret to longevity, and the 10 things that everyone should know. He placed his phone back on the table and surfed the internet for a while. Then he changed his clothes and drove to the city center to find a store that sold surveillance equipment. He bought a set of equipment and arranged to install it in the afternoon. After that, he found a nearby barber shop that looked well renovated and was ready to get his hair cut. However, when he entered the shop, he saw a girl wearing a red device on her ear. She was washing someone's hair. Can it be such a coincidence? Renbaqian laughed. He didn't even think of replying to her message. Previously, he had helped her out because he had nothing better to do. He thought that he wouldn't have the chance to meet her again. After all, in a city with a population of millions, the chances of meeting each other were very small. Many people wouldn't even meet each other in their lifetime, let alone in his situation. He didn't expect to meet Enfei at a random barber shop. He didn't know if this world was too coincidental or if it was fated. Chapter 90. Enfei washed the guest's hair and wrapped a towel around it. When she raised her head, she saw Renbaqian standing beside her. She was so surprised that she opened her mouth and let out an ah sound. New job? Renbaqian smiled and asked. Yes. Enfei's lips opened and closed as she spat out a word. She seemed to have a hard time as she preferred to write on a piece of paper. I saw your message. I will send you a message when I'm free, Renbaqian said. I still have to trouble you for a haircut. Ah. Enfei nodded her head immediately. It seemed that it was easier to say the word ah than other sounds. Renbaqian lowered his head and allowed Enfei to apply shampoo and scrub his hair. Enfei's hands were very soft, and she was very attentive when she was washing his hair. After that, Renbaqian sat on a chair and asked the hairdresser to shave his hair flat. He left a short stubble on his head, and it looked like he had just come out of a prison cell. It was probably because it was too hot. The people of Dayo did not think that their bodies, hair, and skin were inherited by their parents. Everyone's head was clean and bald was also a common hairstyle. For example, Xiongpai was bald. This made Renbaqian equate being bald with being strong. How could one become strong if he was not bald? It was a pity that he could not become strong even if he was bald. Before leaving, Renbaqian even bid farewell to Enfei before leaving. Half an hour later, Renbaqian sat in a restaurant opposite Chun-Ching. He did not look much different from before. Renbaqian, on the other hand, had changed a lot. Most importantly, he had put on a lot of weight and his temperament had become more mature. After all, there was always the risk of losing one's life in that world. It was hard not to be calm. Is there anything you need from me? Chen Qing sat down and stared at Rinpochian for a long time before suddenly asking. It was not strange for Rinpochian to look for him for a meal. Even though he was not a very proactive person, it was normal for him to look for an old friend after not showing his face for a long time. However, Rinpochian did not look for him for lunch often. It was usually at night. Even though there were no additional programs, everyone was usually very busy at noon. On the contrary, having a meal at night was more leisurely and carefree. Indeed, there is something. Help me buy some things. Rinpochian nodded his head and said. What things? For you to ask me to buy something for you, it's definitely not something ordinary. Don't tell me it's firearms? Chen Qing was obviously joking. He knew Rinpochian too well. As long as Rinpochian wasn't tricked, he definitely wouldn't touch these things. Then it must be some other troublesome things or some contraband. To him, it was not a problem at all. However, what Rinpochian said next stunned him. I want firearms, pistols, military crossbows, and grenades, Rinpochian replied calmly. Chen Qing looked at Rinpochian as if he did not know him. He lowered his voice and asked, What are you trying to do? You have a bright future ahead of you. So don't be impulsive. No matter what it is, I can help you think of a solution. Instead of using the power of the government, you chose to use those underhanded methods. Are you crazy? Rinpochian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You are thinking too much. Do I look like that kind of person? Upon hearing Rinpochian's words, Chen Qing heaved a sigh of relief and said, You scared me just now. You don't seem to be that daring. I thought you encountered some kind of stimulation. I will be entering the mountains in a few days. It will be dangerous, so I need to bring something to protect myself. Even so, I don't need a grenade, right? If Rinpochian wanted to enter the mountains with a gun or a crossbow, it would be understandable. But why would he bring a grenade? Carrying things wasn't something that could be played around. I have already said that it will be dangerous. There will be many wild beasts. Sometimes a gun isn't that useful, Rinpochian replied. You can use a rifle. No matter what you encounter, you will be dead after firing a crossbow. Rinpochian shook his head. Using a rifle would be too conspicuous. Even though a military crossbow was filled with a modern industrial vibe, it wasn't as conspicuous as a rifle. Even though the Empress already had some speculations in her heart, she couldn't let others have some suspicions. Furthermore, if she really encountered danger and the opponent was a human, a rifle would easily raise the opponent's vigilance. The concealment of a handgun was much higher. As for a grenade, it gave people the feeling that it was more like a piece of metal. It wasn't so easy to raise people's vigilance. There might even be fools who would use their hands to catch it. Even if they didn't catch it, they wouldn't hide far away. Rinpochian's idea was to use a crossbow for hunting. If he really encountered danger and needed to make a move, he would use a handgun and a silencer. He would try his best not to let others find out, and avoid exposing too many things. A handgun, a grenade, a military crossbow, as well as a silencer, bullets and crossbow bolts. The bulletproof vest must be light and anesthetic that can be smeared on the crossbow bolts must be strong. Also, I need a military knife, Rinpochian calmly said. In order to save his life, he had to prepare as much as possible. When Chen Qing heard the things that Rinpochian wanted, he frowned and said, I always feel that you are not going into the mountains. Instead, you are going to war. However, I won't ask too much. I can help you get them. Do you have any requests? Also, when do you need them? I don't have many requests. You know that I don't know anything about these things. I just want them to be as powerful as possible. However, time is tight. I need them by the day after tomorrow at the latest. It would be best if it is tomorrow. In addition, help me find a place where I can practice my shooting skills. I don't know much about this thing. I need to familiarize myself with it, Rinpochian said. Chen Qing nodded his head. A place to practice your shooting skills is easy. I know of a shooting range. As for the other things, I can help you ask around. It shouldn't be a big problem. After finishing his sentence, he took out his phone and made a call. After making 2 calls, he received a text message and forwarded it to Renbachian. Just call this number and tell it is Heizi who asked you to go there. I will contact the shooting range later. I will pass you the phone number. Renbachian nodded his head. These things could be said to be fully equipped. He had already made the best preparations that he could. The rest would have to depend on luck. For the rest of the meal, both parties didn't mention these things again. Just like what Chen Qing said, as a friend, he would help Renbachian get the things that he needed. He couldn't care less about other things. Renbachian was also very grateful that Chen Qing didn't ask too many questions. This was also what he liked the most about Chen Qing. In the afternoon, Renbachian left the restaurant. Upon returning to his car, he dialed the phone number that Chen Qing gave him. After telling him Heizi's name, the man gave Renbachian 2 ways to make a deal. The first way was to contact him via WeChat. Then Renbachian would place the gun at a certain location, and he would pick it up himself. The other way was for someone to pick it up. Renbachian didn't understand anything, and was more inclined to look at the real thing. Naturally, he chose the second way. After which, they went to a certain location. After waiting for a while, a van stopped by the roadside. Other than the driver, there was a man in the back seat. He handed over a mask. Rules. It was a very sturdy man who looked very fierce. If it was the previous Renbachian, he would definitely stay far away from this kind of person. However, after getting used to seeing aboriginals, he felt that this man looked very ordinary and didn't have much of a deterrent force. Renbachian nodded his head and consciously put on the mask. Chen Qing introduced it, so safety should be guaranteed. After driving for about an hour, Renbachian didn't even know where he was before the van stopped. After Renbachian was brought into the house, he walked down a flight of stairs before the mask was removed. Other than the lights in the surroundings, there was nothing else. It seemed like they were in a basement. There weren't many types of guns in the surroundings. It wasn't as dazzling as what Renbachian had imagined. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. After all, they weren't overseas. There were only a dozen types of guns. There were pistols, rifles, and shotguns. There were 5 types of pistols. There were also 2 crossbows hanging at the side. One was big and the other was small. Both of them had scopes and were hung on the wall. They are here. Take a look. Chapter 91. I don't know much about these things. I need a pistol that is more powerful, has less recoil, and has higher accuracy. Is there a requirement for distance? The man asked. Playing in the woods, I think a distance of tens of meters is the most, Renbachian said. He deliberately used the word play. The man got up and took a black pistol from the shelf, and placed it on the table. This is a domestic-made QSG-92. It should meet your requirements. A few days ago, someone on the internet put this gun in the top 10 famous guns list. Although it was a rumor, this gun is really good. Moreover, it is cheap. The only drawback is that it jams sometimes. Is there anything else besides this? Renbachian was a little scared when he heard about jams. If it suddenly jams when he was waiting for help, he would have no place to cry. CZ-83 check, safe and reliable. There is a 9M. The man picked up another gun and placed it on the table. What's the difference? Renbachian asked. The 9M is more powerful, but the shooting range is shorter. Renbachian played with the CZ-83. Every man was interested in 2 things, guns and cars. Renbachian was no exception. He never thought he would have the opportunity to own a gun. This one, I want a 9M. The recoil won't be too strong, right? Renbachian immediately said. Anyway, he didn't know much about these things. As long as it was powerful, the recoil wasn't too strong, and it was safe and reliable, it would be fine. Moreover, this gun was very comfortable to hold. For a man, these are all small things. The man laughed. Then he made Renbachian make a posture of holding the gun with both hands and patted the bottom of his wrists. About this much strength. Following which, Renbachian bought a military crossbow, bullets, spare magazines, crossbow bolts, silencers, 3 grenades, and a 20-centimeter long military knife. Renbachian spent a sum of money to bring these things back to the car. He was on tenterhooks on the way back, fearing that he would encounter a drunk driver. He never worried in the past, but now there were a lot of prohibited items in the car. If he was caught, it wouldn't just be a tragic ending for him. After returning to that world, Renbachian didn't know what would happen to him after disappearing for a few days in the detention center. He was certain that it wouldn't end well. Fortunately, such a melodramatic thing did not happen. Renbachian successfully sent the items back to his residence. Then he went to the hospital to get the anesthetic that could be used on the crossbow. For the next 2 days, he spent his time practicing his marksmanship and crossbow at the shooting range. While Renbachian was practicing his spear skills in China, the Empress was sitting in the palace and drinking wine. Not long after, the 7th prince was brought in. Greetings to the Empress of Dayo. The 7th prince cupped his fists and said. The other party was the Empress of Dayo while he was the Prince of Great Xia. Naturally, he couldn't be too polite. Ever since the 7th prince came in, the Empress had been staring at his face. Why? Does the Empress of Dayo find me familiar? The 7th prince asked with a smile. The Empress tapped on the wooden couch with her fingers. She didn't say anything, but her body slightly straightened. You aren't him, so the way you speak is different, the Empress said as she drank a cup of wine. I am the 7th prince of Great Xia. The 7th prince's meaning was obvious. Someone take a seat. The Empress's cold voice sounded. Immediately, someone placed a chair in the middle of the palace, and the 7th prince sat on it. You want to see me? What's the matter? I want to exchange something with the Empress of Dayo. I want to use 7 dragon scales to exchange for a bottle of blood. The 7th prince smiled. This was the purpose of his visit to Dayo. As for the birthday celebration, he didn't care at all. If it wasn't for the importance of the item he wanted to exchange, why would he come to this barren land? Whether it was the dragon scales or the bottle of blood, they were extremely valuable to him. The Empress didn't even need to think before saying, it's not enough. The price was too little. Even though the dragon scales were valuable and she could use them, it wasn't enough to exchange for the blood. This was because the Empress knew that the blood he wanted was the blood of the Kirin in the palace. However, the blood of that Kirin wasn't pure. In order to exchange for a bottle of the blood, the Kirin would lose a lot of its vitality. It was unknown how long it would take for it to recover. This dragon scale isn't the one in Great Xia's palace. I found it in the surroundings when I first discovered it. It contains the aura of a dragon that has already disappeared. Now you are the one begging me. The Empress was slightly tempted, but she still didn't relent. Even though the dragon scale was useful, it wasn't a must for her. The fact that the Empress came all the way from Great Xia to Dayo was enough to prove the importance of this bottle of blood. The 7th prince had already expected this and wasn't surprised. He nodded his head and said, plus a drop of dried dragon blood that was found at the same time as the dragon scale. Only then did the Empress nod her head. If Renbachian heard the exchange between the two of them, he would probably be shocked and reevaluate this world. Previously, when he first came to this world, he saw a Kirin. However, he didn't have the chance to see it again. This matter was buried in his heart. However, there was actually a dragon in Great Xia. This meant that this world was much more profound than what he had always thought. I want another person, the 7th prince said again. The Empress frowned. Whether he is an aboriginal or not doesn't matter to the Empress of Dayo, the 7th prince said. The Empress thought of the person who looked exactly like the 7th prince and suddenly laughed. Actually, I like your face very much. Every time I see it, I feel very happy. How about this? Leave your head to me and then take him away. The 7th prince was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that person to be so important to the Empress of Dayo. He thought that a foreigner was insignificant to the Empress. This was a little miscalculation. Since the Empress of Dayo wants to keep him, then forget it. The deal is still valid. The 7th prince put on a smile again and said. However, the Empress's next sentence immediately made him freeze. No, I have changed my mind. I hate people who covet my things. On account that you are the Prince of Great Xia, get lost. The Empress waved her big sleeves on the couch. The seventh prince immediately felt a terrifying aura hit him in the face. After a while, the seventh prince returned to the accommodation that was arranged for him in Dayo. He frowned and his heart was intertwined with anger and puzzlement. Originally, this deal was already settled. However, in the end, because he wanted to ask Rinpoche to come over, it was ruined. Why did this happen? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand why the Empress would make such a decision. That was a drop of blood and a scale left behind by a dragon that had already disappeared. To the Empress of Dayo, it was considered a treasure. Your Highness, is the matter not settled? The beautiful lady called Xiaowu came to his side and asked softly. Chapter 92. Rinpoche touched the bulletproof vest, crossbow, firearms and military knife, and finally felt relieved. On the other side there were sleeping bags and spices. Rinpoche got up and put on the gun holster. After checking the magazine of the gun, he stuffed it in and put on his clothes. Then he tied the bulletproof vest in the sleeping bag, and put it on when he reached the destination. When everything was ready, there was a knock on the door. Sir Ren, it's almost time for the great hunt. Rinpoche knew it was Tai Dao's voice, but he didn't expect him to inform him. When he opened the door, the sky was already starting to brighten. Tai Dao was standing outside. Sir, the great hunt is about to start, don't be late. Take this, it will definitely help you get a good ranking in the great hunt, and you might even get the first place. Gun Gun and Tian Tian were bedridden because they were woken up. They hugged Tai Dao's leg and gnawed on it, but Tai Dao didn't even look at them. Anyway, his skin was rough and thick, and they couldn't bite through it. It was just a little itchy. Rinpoche looked at the small porcelain bottle in Tai Dao's hand, took it, and asked, "What is this?" Tai Dao said that it could help him get a good ranking in the Great Hunt, so it must be related to hunting. Could it be a knockout drug that could knock out humans and animals within a radius of 100 meters? Then he could be picky, and only then could he get a good ranking, right? Tai Dao revealed a hearty smile. This was passed down from my ancestors, and it can attract all the wild beasts within a certain range. I don't have the chance to use it, so I'm giving it to you. Rinpoche looked at it, and felt the porcelain bottle burning in his hand. He almost threw it away. Are you thinking that I'm not dying fast enough? I might not even be able to defeat a rabbit, and you want me to use this to attract all the wild beasts in the mountains? I reckon I won't even be able to find their corpses. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief and asked calmly, "Tell me, how much do you hate me?" Tai Dao was at a loss. Sir, this is a good thing, and it's hard to find nowadays. This bottle was passed down from my grandfather to my father, and my father passed it down to me. You are a good person, and since you are participating in the Great Hunt, I decided to give it to you. Rinpoche sighed. It was really hard to reason with this bunch of fools. If I had that kind of strength, would I still need to say it? However, when he thought about it, this thing was really useful. If he encountered any trouble, he could just throw it there. Who knows, it might have a miraculous effect. Thanks. Rinpoche patted Tai Dao's shoulder, put the bottle away, and pointed to the sleeping bag tied with a rope. Help me carry it. All right. Tai Dao swiftly carried the sleeping bag, and followed Rinpoche to the cow pen in the beast park. The mountain-gazing bird was there. Rinpoche pulled the mountain-gazing bird out, and patted its head twice. The mountain-gazing bird immediately squinted its eyes in comfort. Rinpoche watched as Tai Dao tied the sleeping bag and other items onto the mountain-gazing bird's body. He hung the crossbow and quiver at the side, took out some perfume from the sleeping bag, and sprayed it all over the mountain-gazing bird's body. Then he flipped over and sat on it. Achoo! As soon as Rinpoche sat on the mountain-gazing bird, he sneezed due to the strong smell of perfume. The mountain-gazing bird seemed to dislike the smell on its body and paced around restlessly. Rinpoche quickly patted its head to appease it. Help me take care of Gun Gun and Tian Tian. Rinpoche called out. Sir, water bag. Tai Dao glanced at it and quickly called out. Rinpoche slapped his forehead. He had almost forgotten about this matter. He rode the mountain-gazing bird to the well, filled the water bag, and left. After leaving the beast park, He went straight to the plaza outside the palace. The assembly point was there. From afar, he could see that the plaza was brightly lit. Torches were set up in the surroundings, and at the same time, the roars of humans and beasts could be heard from afar. When he got closer, he could see that there was already a large group of people at the edge of the plaza. When he got closer, he could see clearly that there were about 200 to 300 people at one side of the plaza. He could tell that they were aboriginals, and there were both men and women talking loudly. The men were all tall and big. Some of them were wearing tight-fitting silk clothes, and some were wearing animal skins. Renbachian knew that these were the sons and daughters of the court officials. If they were wearing animal skins, it was either because they liked it or because this was the great hunt. Therefore, they dressed more traditionally. The women were about the same. Most of them had good figures and were full of vigor and energy. There wasn't a single one who was slightly plump. Their hair was tied behind their heads, and they looked very heroic. At this moment, these people were talking loudly. It seemed like many of them knew each other. Below them were all kinds of mounts. There were blood-red crooked cows, horses from other countries, goats, and even an elephant. Renbachian didn't know where he got the elephant from. It was a woman, and the height of her mount made her stand out like a crane among chickens. There was also someone riding a saber-toothed tiger. When the saber-toothed tiger saw that there were so many animals around it, it seemed a little dissatisfied. It let out a low growl, but before it could make a sound, it was slapped on the head by the burly man behind it. "Be quiet, don't create trouble for me." Renbachian looked at the mounts of these people, each one more powerful than the other. Then he looked at the mountain-gazing bird that he was riding on. It felt like an alto mixed in with hundreds of luxury cars. He consciously found a place to wait in the periphery and observe the situation. A gentle breeze blew past. Achoo! Achoo! 5 or 6 people who were slightly closer to him sneezed and glared at Renbachian. They had seen Renbachian before. Among them, a few had heard of this Honglu deputy who had recently gained some fame. However, no one paid attention to him. However, the smell from his body or the mountain-gazing bird under his, but was too strong. It wasn't the stench of the mountain-gazing bird, but a kind of pungent aroma that made their noses itch. Renbachian was speechless. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have sprayed so much perfume. He got the mountain-gazing bird to move to the side, further away from those people. There weren't only 200 to 300 people in the plaza. There were also a few rows of soldiers in the middle of the plaza. From a visual estimation, there were about 500 of them. They were all riding on those kind of huge sheep. Only the chest and the left shoulder were covered by leather. The rest of their bodies were completely exposed. At the other end of the plaza, there was another group of people. From afar, he could see a few carriages that he had seen before. Needless to say, these were the people from the other 3 nations. Renbachian didn't recognize any of those second-generation officials. They also didn't care about this Honglu deputy. Renbachian knew quite a few people on the other side, but most of them wished they could skin him alive. Furthermore, he was now an official of Dayo. He couldn't possibly mingle with those people. Renbachian could only wait by himself in the periphery. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait for too long. As the sky started to brighten, the palace gates opened. A few rows of fully armed imperial guards rode out in a single file. Renbachian was very familiar with the attire of these imperial guards. They were imperial guards from the palace. Chapter 93. The Imperial Guard stopped in front of the 500 cavalrymen and formed into 2 groups. Following which, the Kirin that Renbachian had seen before came out of the palace gate. It was pulling a large imperial carriage that was surrounded by cloth curtains. After the Kirin and the imperial carriage came out, all the cavalrymen and imperial guards held onto their sabers with one hand on their mounts and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Your Majesty." The descendants of the aboriginal officials also sat on their mounts and did the same thing. However, their weapons weren't as neat as those of the imperial guards and cavalrymen. It could be said that there were all kinds of weapons such as sabers, halberds, hammers, and so on. All of them were hung beside their mounts. Only the people from the other nations didn't make any noise. Let's set off. The Empress's cold voice sounded. Following the Empress's order, the 500 cavalrymen and Imperial Guards split into two groups. One group led the way while the Imperial Guards followed behind. The Imperial carriage that the Empress was riding on also moved forward slowly. The other group of cavalrymen and Imperial Guards automatically followed behind the Empress's Imperial carriage. Following which, the descendants of the court officials also spurred on their mounts and followed behind. After they left, Renbachian also followed on his mountain-gazing bird. Behind him were the people from the other three nations. Many of them looked at Renbachian, who wasn't far in front of them, and sneered. They even deliberately made their voices very loud, so that Renbachian could hear them. The mountain-gazing bird's head was 2.5 meters tall, and its back was about 1.4 meters off the ground. Renbachian could ride it, but compared to the other people's mounts, it was like a little chick following behind. It was very cold. Looking at Renbachian in front of them, the Scions who had been tormented by him for the past few days suddenly found a sense of superiority and laughed at him. On one hand, it was because the mountain-gazing bird that Renbachian was riding was extremely ugly among the other mounts. It was like a piece of rusty metal mixed into a pile of gold, silver, and jewels. It was an eyesore. Or it could be said that Huangbo had mixed into a group of handsome men and beautiful women. On the other hand, it was because Renbachian looked lonely. Even though this was Dayo, he was still an outsider. Renbachian simply didn't care about those people behind him. His face didn't matter to him, at least compared to his life. On the way out of the city, Renbachian was bored, so he sized up the people in front of him and made guesses. For example, there was a burly man in front who couldn't even sit stably on the back of his mount. His body kept leaning forward, and his buttocks were sticking out. Renbachian thought maliciously that this man probably had hemorrhoids. As for whether it was true or not, that was not important. In any case, he didn't dare to ask. He estimated that if he went up and asked, "Brother, do you have hemorrhoids?" If they were on Earth, they would also be glared at, let alone here. There was an 80% chance that they would grab the most convenient weapon in their hands and directly cut him open. Along the way out of the city, the laughter behind them had long since disappeared. After all, the people behind them weren't a bunch of retarded children. Even though they were mocking Renbachian, they couldn't laugh all the way if Renbachian didn't respond. Otherwise, they would feel bored. Not long after he left the city, he saw the sun rising in the distance. When Renbachian was on Earth, he didn't really see the sun rise. It seemed that everyone was used to this natural phenomenon. Unless it was at a specific location, very few people would pay attention to it. However, looking at the fireball here, which was twice the size of the sun on Earth, he still felt that it was somewhat interesting. However, after looking at it for a while, it started to hurt his eyes and he had no choice but to look away. The group of people wasn't slow. Even though they weren't as fast as a car, in this world, whether it was a cow or a sheep, they could still feel the strong wind blowing on their faces when they ran. There was also a large amount of dust that was kicked up by their trampling. This was the main reason why Renbachian kept tilting his head to look at the sun just now. This road was a flattened dirt road. After a large group of mounts ran past, they directly kicked up a cloud of dust. The people behind them were all eating the dust, and Renbachian felt as if he was rushing into a sandstorm. Renbachian buried his head behind the mountain-gazing bird. Unknowingly, an Imperial Guard appeared beside him and shouted, "Storyteller Ren, Her Majesty is summoning you." Renbachian turned his head to take a look. Indeed, it was Sherhu. Most people thought that his position was a deputy, but this was only temporary. After the Empress's birthday celebration, he would have to return this position. His position was still the palace's storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall. "Let's go now," Renbachian shouted. Renbachian shouted. Following which, Sherhu turned the mountain-gazing bird to the side and sped up to pass by those second-generation officials, leaving behind a trail of fragrance. When Renbachian passed by them, he turned his head to take a look. Everyone was covered in dust, as if they had just come out from a coal mine. As for their demeanor and imposing manner, they were already beyond the ninth heaven. On the contrary, some of the ladies covered their faces with a piece of cloth. It seemed that regardless of where they came from, They valued their face a lot. Their heads could be chopped off, but their hairstyle could not be messed up. Even though it wasn't right, the meaning was similar. Those people also looked curiously at Rinpoche, who was riding on a little chick, as he advanced. With an imperial guard leading the way, they could guess that it was the Empress who summoned him. It seemed that Deputy Run had recently gained the Empress's favor. It was just that the fragrance from the mountain-gazing bird was too pungent. As the mountain-gazing bird ran in front of them, that perfume went straight into their noses. When Rinpoche arrived at the side of the carriage, the curtain in front of the carriage was pulled open. It was Qin Yuan, who waved at Rinpoche. Rinpoche looked at the moving carriage. How was he going to get on it? Fortunately, he didn't need to think too much. Sherhu stretched out his arm and threw him. Rinpoche felt as if he was riding on the clouds. Qin Yuan, who was on the carriage, smiled as she grabbed Rinpoche's arm and placed him on the carriage. It was as if they were passing a ball. Rinpoche calmed himself down. He was a little nervous when he was flying in the air just now. Following which, he cupped his hands towards Qin Yuan and said, "Thank you, Miss Qin Yuan." Then he entered the carriage and paid his respects. The Empress seemed to only like red. At most, she would occasionally reveal her white undergarments. At this moment, she was still dressed like this with her hair tied up with a simple hairpin. The Empress looked at Rinpoche carefully. As expected, he was exactly the same as the seventh prince. If she didn't know that Rinpoche had a mysterious origin, and was even more mysterious than the princes of Great Xia, she would have thought that he was a descendant of the Emperor of Great Xia. "Have you prepared for the great hunt this time?" The Empress asked softly. "I have made some preparations, but your humble servant isn't good at martial arts or hunting. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to gain anything even if I go up the mountain. Why don't I tell stories to your majesty at the foot of the mountain? I can also be of some use to relieve your boredom," Rinpoche quickly replied. It would be great if the Empress could let him accompany her at the foot of the mountain. However, the Empress didn't care at all and said, "Even if you can't come in first, you still have to gain something. I have high hopes for you. If you can't even hunt, won't you be throwing my face?" Rinpoche was speechless. What kind of logic was this? He had never heard that a teacher had to know martial arts and a chef had to be a soldier from the special forces. Chapter 94. Rinpoche told the Empress stories for the whole morning. Listening to the stories on the way to their destination was a good way to pass the time. Rinpoche also suffered a little less. At least he didn't have to suffer like those people who ate dirt the whole morning and looked like refugees. Even though he was riding a mountain-gazing bird, running for the whole morning was a very tiring task. When it was almost noon, everyone arrived at their destination. It was a flat ground at the foot of the mountain. Beside it was a meandering stream. It was a good place to set up camp. Just as they landed, the 500 cavalrymen spread out and scouted the surroundings. The remaining imperial guards were more for decoration than actual use. The Empress's strength made her completely unafraid of any danger. When Rinpoche came out of the carriage, the others had already run to the stream to wash up. The young masters from the other three nations had also set up camp in the distance. In fact, there weren't many tents. Most of them rode in carriages. Only Ning Kaichin, Mr. Emptiness, and a few others got their mounts from somewhere. At noon, almost everyone brought their own food. Only Rinpoche came in a hurry after he woke up. Even his water bag had to be reminded by Tai Dao. He didn't bring any food. Fortunately, he had a way. The Empress didn't bring a chef, so he naturally had to prepare the Empress's lunch. There were fruits on the carriage, so Rinpoche could prepare some meat. He would cook for the Empress first, then he would ask the imperial guards for some meat and roast it himself. After all, these imperial guards didn't go up the mountain, so they brought food with them. Not long after, an imperial guard brought back a rabbit with a mouthful of fangs and 2 wild birds the size of wild geese. Rinpoche instructed the 2 imperial guards to skin and clean the wild birds. He then started a fire. The people in this world use flint. He took out a windproof lighter to start a fire, which attracted the attention of many people nearby. After all, it was much more convenient to use a finger to light a fire than flint. After he lit the fire, a burly man squatted beside him and said, "Brother, I'll exchange something with you for the one that emits fire. Is that okay?" Renbachian turned his head and looked. He seemed to have seen this burly man before. Looking at his clothes, he recognized him. He was the burly man who rode the saber-toothed tiger. Even while squatting, he was still taller than Renbachian. "However, you look like you're in your 30s. Is it appropriate to call me brother? May I know how old you are?" Renbachian asked curiously. He felt that he was still relatively inexperienced. Could it be that the other party didn't even have this little bit of insight? "I'll be 17 soon." The big man grinned. The corner of Renbachian's mouth twitched. His face was indeed very mature. "You don't have to change. Can you bring me up the mountain?" Renbachian rummaged through the things that were hanging in the sleeping bag just now. All the seasonings were inside. "I'm going deep into the mountains. I might not come back at night," the big man said. Renbachian knew that the great hunt would last from noon today to noon tomorrow. However, most people would return at night. After all, they needed to rest. This person wanted to go deep into the mountains. It seemed like he wanted to find better prey. Renbachian was a little hesitant. It was much more dangerous at night in the forest than during the day. Previously, Caretaker Sure mentioned that there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. His original goal was to walk around nearby and kill a few random prey. "How about tomorrow? I might need it tonight. When you come out tomorrow, I will give this to you," Renbachian said. It was just a windproof lighter. It cost a few dozen yuan each. There was no harm in giving him one. One had to know that all the young men and women present today were the children of Dayo's officials. Befriending a lighter was a huge profit. "Thank you, old brother. My name is Du Chongkong. I will look for you tomorrow after I leave the mountain." Du Chongkong grinned. Renbachian smiled. After a while, the 2 wild birds and the rabbit were sent over. Du Chongkong was still squatting beside him. Renbachian turned his head and asked, "Is there anything else? I see that you have a lot of fun things. Can I play with them?" Du Chongkong grinned as he pointed at the mountain-gazing bird that was chased far away. Renbachian didn't want to chase it so far away. However, the scent of the mountain-gazing bird's perfume was too strong. "You want to see my crossbow, right?" Renbachian thought for a moment, and knew that the things hanging on the mountain-gazing bird were the sleeping bag, crossbow, and bolts. "That's called a crossbow? I have seen the crossbow from Great Xia. It's different from yours." The big man's eyes were filled with interest. "Yours is much better looking." A crossbow manufactured by modern industry was naturally filled with a modern aura. It wasn't something that those ancient crossbows could compare to, especially when this crossbow was equipped with a scope. Renbachian saw that the big man was eager to give it a try. He knew that it was already good enough for him to wait here for half a day and greet him. The aboriginals usually acted faster than their brains. Didn't they see that a few rash fellows were already running towards his mountain-gazing bird? Just now, when he passed by the mountain-gazing bird, many people saw the crossbow hanging on its body. "Tell them not to break it. I still have to use it to hunt in the mountains," Renbachian said. "All right, I will kick the balls of whoever breaks it." Du Chongkong laughed heartily and ran towards the mountain-gazing bird in big strides. Not long after, a cry of surprise could be heard from the other side. A few people were aiming their crossbows through the scope. The glass of the scope and the ability to see into the distance were very magical in their eyes. They treated it as a treasure and snatched it over and over again. Renbachian was piercing the rabbits and wild birds with a sharpened wooden stick. He felt a toothache as he looked at the other side. Those fellows had better be careful. If the crossbow was broken, how was he going to hunt in the mountains? Du Chongkong sent one of them flying with a kick. Yes, he was sent flying 7 to 8 meters away. Then he elbowed another person to the ground, following which he ran to the back with the crossbow to show off to someone. Renbachian couldn't see what was happening behind him as he was blocked by the Imperial Guards. He could only roast the rabbits and birds in peace. However, he could hear the cheers coming from behind him from time to time. When the rabbits and birds were roasted until they were half done, he sprinkled seasonings on them. Not long after, an extremely rich aroma spread far and wide. Many people who smelled the aroma craned their necks to look over to see what was so fragrant. The seasonings that Rinpoche took were only available in the palace and the beast park. Even the big shots in the imperial court didn't know about this, let alone them. After almost an hour, the rabbits and birds were roasted. Rinpoche was sweating profusely. Roasting these things wasn't an easy task. After all, he had to keep turning them to prevent them from getting burnt. After sending the rabbits and birds to the front of the imperial carriage, Qing Yuan went to fetch them. Rinpoche asked for 2 big pieces of mutton from the imperial guards and prepared to cook his dinner. This time, when the meat was just roasted, Rinpoche felt someone sitting beside him. He turned his head and saw Du Changkong grinning at him. "Where's the crossbow?" "I'll get it for you now. Leave one for me," Du Changkong shouted as he ran. Rinpoche realized that this 17-year-old Du Changkong with the face of an uncle was really friendly. Not long after, Du Changkong came back with a bitter face. "I'm afraid I can't get your crossbow back. It's in the hands of Hong Lass. I can't defeat her. You promised me previously. In the end, you can't even defeat a woman and you came back empty-handed? Do you still have the prestige and ambition of a man? Can you still find a wife in the future? Others will look down on you. A man's words are like spilled water. Even if you die, you must keep your words. If you can't keep your words, can you still be called a man?" Rinpoche instigated in a low voice. As for who Hong Lass was, he didn't care at all. After being instigated by Rinpoche, Du Changkong had a determined look on his face. "Don't worry. I'll definitely get back what I promised you. I'll fight it out with Hong Lass." After finishing his sentence, he left with an imposing aura of a hero who would never return. Rinpoche looked at his back view and nodded his head. This 17-year-old rash youth was indeed unable to be provoked. Chapter 95. Hongxian, let's have a match. If I win, you will give me that crossbow. I promise to return it to someone else. You can't expect me to go back on my words and become a ballless woman. Rinpoche was roasting the meat when he heard a loud shout from behind. Immediately, black lines appeared on his forehead. "Go back on your words and become a ballless woman? Did you get kicked in the head by a donkey? You're really afraid that you won't die fast enough." Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the carriage behind him. He felt that the Empress would mark him down in her book. Regardless of whether he won or lost, he would be punished in the future. Rinpoche felt that he had to stay away from Du Changkong in the future to avoid being implicated. If pig-headed teammates were divided into 4 grades, A, B, C, and D, Du Changkong would definitely be S grade. The meat was almost done roasting. Rinpoche immediately took the stick with 2 pieces of roasted meat and ran to the back to watch the show. Rinpoche reckoned that Du Changkong would definitely not die, but he would definitely be beaten up. Storyteller Ren. Just as Rinpoche got up, he heard Qing Yuan calling him. He turned his head and saw her waving at him. He quickly ran over. However, Qing Yuan's expression was a little weird, which made Rinpoche have a bad feeling. He climbed into the carriage and saw the Empress looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "What did you say to him just now?" Rinpoche's face turned green. Was he on fire now? After all, Du Changkong just said a few words and ran to the back to shout. He wouldn't believe it if he said that he didn't say anything. "Your Majesty is wise, this has nothing to do with me. In my heart, women can hold up half of the sky. I really don't know what triggered him to say such a thing. I only said that a man should keep his words. Since he took the crossbow away, he should get it back. What he said has nothing to do with me." Rinpoche quickly cried out his grievances. The Empress looked at Rinpoche, flicked her sleeves, and Rinpoche felt as if he was riding on a cloud and flew away. He fell on his butt. Even though it was grass, it still made him grimace. Rinpoche wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He was actually tricked by a 17-year-old fool. He hoped that the Empress wouldn't remember him in the book. Rubbing his butt, he picked up the skewer and limped to the back of the car. Just a moment ago, he wanted to watch the show. Now he gritted his teeth and wanted to see how that idiot would get beaten up. Just now, this circle was bustling with noise and excitement. Some people were roasting meat, some were chatting, and the girl sitting on the back of the elephant was holding a crossbow and looking into the distance through the scope. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. Although the scope's ability to see into the distance wasn't strong, it still had a certain effect. It could clearly see into the distance, which really made the girl very curious. Compared to the treasures in the mansion, it was much more interesting to her. Near the girl, there were also a few men and women sitting on the ground, occasionally looking up at the girl on the back of the elephant, waiting for her to have enough fun. At this moment, Du Changkong had a determined look on his face, as if he was ready to die a martyr. He walked 20 meters in front of the girl and shouted, "Hong Xian, let's have a match. If I win, you will give me the crossbow. I promised that I would return it when the time comes. You can't let me go back on my word and become a ballless woman." In a split second, the entire place quietened down. Everyone turned to look at him. The only difference was that all the men were astonished and did not know what was wrong with him. Following which, a few burly men laughed out loud. "Ballless woman? Ha 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 ha, I'm dying of laughter." At first, the girl was astonished, followed by anger. She glared at Du Changkong as if she wanted to kill him. What did he mean by that? Go back on his word and become a ballless woman? These words were too vicious. He included all the female aboriginals in the crowd. More importantly, he even included Her Majesty, who was in the carriage. However, Du Changkong was still unconsciously looking at the girl on the back of the elephant with a provocative look. The girl named Hong Xian was about 17 or 18 years old. After she recovered from her astonishment, the veins on her forehead throbbed. She glared fiercely at Du Changkong and threw the crossbow to someone nearby. She twisted her body and flipped down from the back of the elephant. "You said ballless woman?" Hong Xian stared at Du Changkong as if she wanted to kill him. "Do all of you have them?" At this moment, Du Changkong was still encouraged by Renbaqian's provocation. His blood rushed to his head. "Pfff ha 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 ha." After a short period of silence, an even crazier laughter erupted. This time, it wasn't only the few men who laughed. Almost all the men in the crowd burst into laughter. They laughed while wiping their tears. "Did this Du Changkong eat tiger's guts today? Bastard, since you want to die so badly, I'll grant your wish." Hong Xian's originally delicate face had turned green, and the veins on her forehead were popping out. Du Changkong looked at Hong Xian, who was about to go crazy from anger. Suddenly, he felt guilty. Did he provoke her too much? However, it was too late for him to hide now. There were so many people watching. If he were to hide now, he would be too ashamed to face anyone in the future. He made up his mind and said, "If I win, you have to return me the crossbow. I took it from someone else anyway." If Renbaqian was here, he would definitely be touched. This silly fellow was about to be skinned alive, yet he was still thinking about his crossbow. What a chivalrous man. However, Renbaqian was currently rubbing his butt on the ground. He was hoping that Hong Xian would not hold back and beat him to death. By the time he limped over, there was already a big circle surrounding him. "Du Changkong, you are a man now. You must persevere for a while longer. Du Changkong, I have high hopes for you. Don't embarrass yourself. Hong Xian, teach him a good lesson." When Renbaqian came over, he heard the chaotic cheers. They were just there to watch the show and not meddle in other people's business. Everything in the field had been moved away. On the rather big field, there was only Du Changkong and a lady dressed in green clothes facing each other with a distance of 10 meters between them. Is this Hong Xian? I wonder what is her relationship with Hong Wan. Renbaqian pondered. In any case, the two of them did not look alike. They probably only had the same surname. Just as Renbaqian stood still in the periphery, the two people in the field collided with each other. Both parties were exchanging blows. In terms of size, Du Changkong was much bigger than Hong Xian. However, it did not mean that the bigger the size, the more powerful one was. Otherwise, the Empress would not be the #1 expert in Dayo and Du Changkong would not have such a bitter face at the start. Both parties only exchanged a few blows and Du Changkong was sent flying. Those with good eyesight could see that Hong Xiu had blocked Du Changkong's arm with both of her fists. Immediately, Du Changkong could not control his arm, and his fist smashed into Du Changkong's chest. Renbaqian could not see all these. Even though their movements were not flashy, they were too fast for him. Du Changkong rolled on the ground, got up and collided with Hong Xian again. However, this time around, he was sent flying even faster. Just as they collided, a bang was heard and he was sent flying. Even though Renbaqian could not see clearly from the side, he could feel the pain when he heard the sound of Du Changkong crashing heavily on the ground. Did you say that people who don't keep their promises are the same as women without balls? Who are you calling untrustworthy? What's wrong with women? The entire field could only see Hong Xian kicking Du Changkong around like a ball. Without waiting for him to get up, she sent him flying with another kick. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been kicked to death. However, Du Changkong was able to withstand the beatings. Every time he would defend his vital parts. Even though he was kicked everywhere, he was still able to get up. Seeing him being beaten up like a ball, the crowd roared with laughter. Chapter 96. Fortunately, Hong Xian did not want to kill him. She had been conserving her strength. Seeing that Du Changkong was unable to get up, she spat on him. Good job, Hong Xian. A few people cheered and went over to hug Hong Xian. Seeing that there was no more show to watch, the rest dispersed. A few people went forward to check on Du Changkong's injuries. There were no major problems, just some minor injuries. Coupled with the fact that he had lost all his strength, he would not be able to get up for a while. Renbaqian looked at Du Changkong lying on the ground and sighed. He had to go and check on this useless teammate of his. Can you still get up? Renbaqian squatted beside Du Changkong and asked. Hong Xian is getting more and more powerful. She was too ruthless and I almost lost my life. Du Changkong's face did not have many injuries, but his body was bruised and swollen. He was gasping for air as he lay there. Renbaqian did not utter a word. It was good enough that you are still alive. Even if he did not understand what was going on, he knew that Hong Xian did not hit him too hard. Just by looking at how Hong Xian was able to send him flying with just a few blows, he knew that Hong Xian was much more powerful than him. If Hong Xian had the intention, would you still be here groaning now? Do you think you are just going to get beaten up? I reckon that you will suffer in the future. Thinking about Hong Xian, Renbaqian hesitated if he should ask Hong Xian for his crossbow. He reckoned that Hong Xian was still angry, and it would be troublesome for him to get it back. Forget it. Fortunately, he still had a pistol. Originally, he wanted to keep the pistol for a sneak attack. Now he could only be more careful and try not to be noticed by others. As long as he was not seen hunting with a pistol, no one would know what it was. Renbaqian ignored Du Changkong and got up to leave. On the other side, Hong Xian and the people around her saw Renbaqian squatting beside Du Changkong. Hong Xian was furious. I was wondering why that bastard was so daring today. I heard that there is a Honglu deputy who is not from Dayo. I reckon that it is him. He is quite daring. I will go and teach him a lesson, a lady immediately said. The rest did not object. After all, a Honglu deputy and a foreigner at that, was not worthy of the attention of the children of the court officials. In particular, when she thought about how that scoundrel Du Changkong must have been taught by this brat, she felt even more disgusted with Renbaqian than with Du Changkong. Just as Renbaqian got up and walked a few steps back, he saw a young lady, who was about 1.65 meters tall and had tan skin. She was wearing tight-fitting clothes that made it easy for her to move around, and she was walking in his direction. Behind him was Du Changkong. However, Du Changkong had just been beaten up like a dog, and it did not seem like he was looking for him. Moreover, Du Changkong's gaze was always on him. Renbaqian still took a step to the side. If the other party wasn't looking for him, he could just walk over. However, his efforts were in vain. The other party was coming for him. Did you teach him those words? The woman asked impolitely. Of course not. Renbaqian naturally shook his head. He couldn't take the blame for this. If he did, he would be in big trouble. Bah! A coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it, the woman said in disdain. Renbachian was speechless. Did she really think that he was the one who taught her? He did ask him to bring back the crossbow, but he didn't expect him to add so much drama. It really wasn't me. Whether it was or not, don't even think about taking that thing back. Next time, if you have the ability, come over yourself. Don't let others look down on you, coward. The woman had a look of disdain on her face. After she finished speaking, she couldn't be bothered to look at Renbachian anymore, and walked straight away. Renbachian stood at the same spot for a while, and suddenly laughed. Even though you are the son of an official, I am the son of an official. In any case, I am a secondary class, rank 6 deputy. You can do whatever you want to me? Do you really think that I am easy to bully and that anyone can pinch me for no reason? It was impossible for him not to be angry. He was still a young man. Even though his arms couldn't run horses, he was still a young man. Naturally, he was angry to be treated like this. Initially, he didn't want the crossbow, but now he really had to get it back. Otherwise, how would he be able to mingle in Dayo in the future? If he could pinch anyone who came over, he would be labeled as a coward. In the future, if someone wanted to do the same to him, what would he do? The Empress was just beside him. How could she not notice the current situation? Perhaps it wasn't a big deal now, and she was too lazy to speak. But if he was a coward, what would she think? Renbachian didn't think that the Empress, who was the 7th most powerful expert in the world, would think that he was a coward. How could he still use a subordinate who could be pinched by a few brats who came from an official's family? Thinking of this, Renbachian wore a smile on his face as he walked step by step towards the red line. That woman had just walked back to the red line and muttered, "A coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it." However, she immediately realized that the others were looking in the direction she came from. She turned her head and saw the coward from before walking towards them with a smile on his face. However, that smile was a little cold. Renbachian walked to the front of them, pointed to the crossbow in one of their hands and said, "That thing is mine." "Not anymore." The woman from before turned around and looked up. "What official position do you have?" Renbachian asked with a smile. "Why do you care what official position I have? Your secondary class, rank 6 deputy, is nothing in my eyes." That woman sneered. The others laughed as well. Indeed, a rank 6 deputy was nothing in their eyes. If it was an aboriginal, they wouldn't go overboard. However, since it was a foreigner, they had nothing to fear. Renbachian looked at their unbridled expressions, and the smile on his face became even colder. He enunciated each word clearly. "I don't care what official positions your ancestors, your grandfather, or your father have. That's them, not you. They can receive salaries from the imperial court, but that salary isn't for you. Usually when people give in to you, it's not because you are amazing, but because they don't want to embarrass you because of your ancestors. What qualifications do you have to look down on a secondary class, rank 6 deputy? Even if it's a rank 9 official, as long as he receives a salary from the imperial court, even if he doesn't make any contributions to Dayo, he will still work hard. The foundation of this nation is their blood and sweat. You may look down on me, but my official position was conferred by Her Majesty. I receive a salary from the imperial court, so I work for Her Majesty and represent the imperial court. What qualifications do you have to look down on me? You dare to rob an official appointed by the imperial court? Are you even worthy? You really don't care about the imperial court and the Empress's reputation. Do you dare to kill an official? If you dare to rob, why wouldn't you dare to kill?" After Renbachian finished speaking word by word, the scene immediately quietened down. Even the surroundings quietened down. Renbachian's voice wasn't soft, and many people heard him. Everyone shifted their gaze between Renbachian and those few people. Many people stopped what they were doing and stood up. The smiles on those few people's faces had long froze, and the gazes of the others made them feel as if they were being pricked by needles. You actually dare to teach me a lesson?" That woman looked incredulous. She then shouted, "Who do you think you are? I'm not your father, so I really don't dare to teach you a lesson. As for who I am, you can ask Her Majesty what kind of official I am. It seems that your ancestors and I are the same, Rinpoche said maliciously. He was relying on the fact that none of the Aboriginal youths who participated in the Great Hunt had an official position. Those with official positions wouldn't participate in the Great Hunt. After participating in the Great Hunt, these people would probably be assigned to the army or other places. However, that was a matter for the future. Rinpoche was an exception. He was a secondary class, rank 6 deputy who fell from the sky. He was personally selected by the Empress to participate in this great hunt, and was different from the others. That woman was infuriated by him calling her father an ancestor. She raised her hand and was about to slap this bastard to death. Rinpoche's back was drenched in cold sweat. Someone quickly come and stop this silly woman. If she slapped him, he would really be dead meat. It would be too late even if the other party was severely punished. However, he maintained his composure on the surface and looked at those few people with a smile on his face. Sparrowhawk, stop. A loud shout came from nearby. At the same time, Hong Xian's unsightly expression finally changed. She kicked that woman called Sparrowhawk's arm away. Don't stop me, I'll kill him. Sparrowhawk's eyes were red. It seemed that Rinpoche's words had infuriated her. You really dare to kill an official appointed by the imperial court? Are you trying to rebel? Rinpoche sneered. He knew that the other party hated him to death, so he didn't mind if she hated him a little more. Chapter 97. Following Rinpoche's words, a burly man appeared beside Rinpoche and glared at the lady opposite him. Sparrowhawk, he's right. How dare you disrespect an official appointed by the imperial court? Shiyueya, what did you say? The lady named Sparrowhawk looked over in disbelief. Everyone else understands except for you. I'm an official appointed by the imperial court. No matter what, I represent Her Majesty and the imperial court. What are you trying to do? How dare you rob and kill an official in front of Her Majesty? This shows how bold you are, Rinpoche said coldly. At this moment, a few more figures appeared beside Rinpoche and looked at the lady named Sparrowhawk. Even though they were young and had the backing of their fathers, Rinpoche's words made them understand one thing. Rinpoche represented Her Majesty and was part of the dynasty that was forged by their ancestors. If Rinpoche did something wrong, Her Majesty could punish him, and so could his superiors. They really didn't have the right to do so. If they attacked Rinpoche, they would be disrespecting the rules of the dynasty that was forged by their ancestors. They would be everyone's enemy. Furthermore, Her Majesty was right beside them. How dare you attack? How bold are you? Hong Xian's face turned ugly, but she had already understood what was going on. That was why she stopped Sparrowhawk. The others also understood what was going on, and didn't dare to speak. The others also understood and stood on Rinpoche's side. Even though most of these children knew each other. However, Rinpoche's words and Sparrowhawk's behavior made them forget about their old friendship. In a short period of time, 10 more figures appeared beside Rinpoche. Only Sparrowhawk was overwhelmed by anger. However, the situation in front of her made her feel as if a basin of ice water had been poured over her. The cold gazes of the others suddenly reminded her of what she had done just now. She wasn't smart, but she wasn't a fool either. If she were to act foolishly in such a situation, she wouldn't be able to survive. It's our fault. We'll return the things to you. Even though Hong Xian knew that she couldn't refute the other party's words, she couldn't help but treat them coldly since they had put them in such a situation. Rinpoche caught the crossbow thrown over. He didn't need to think to know that he had already offended them, and might as well vent his anger. Moreover, although his attitude was unyielding, he was still the reasonable one, after all. The other party would not be able to find trouble with him in a short period of time. When the limelight was over and the other party wanted to find trouble with him, he felt that his position in the Empress's heart would be even more important. He still didn't know that the Empress had flipped the table with the 7th Prince of Great Xia because of him. Even though it wasn't entirely because of him, it also showed that he had a certain place in the Empress's heart. If an apology works, Then what's the point of the law? Do you really think that His Majesty doesn't know what happened here? Instead of apologizing, why don't you admit your guilt yourself? After saying this, Renbachian didn't look at them anymore. He cupped his hands toward the people around him and said, "Thank you, everyone. There's no need to thank me. You are right. Dayo was founded by our ancestors. My grandfather and father have shed their blood for Dayo. Every inch of Dayo is the blood of our ancestors. For them, we can't allow anyone to trample on them, because this is trampling on the bones of all our ancestors." Shiyueya, who was the first to appear beside Renbachian, said in a deep voice. As he spoke to Renbachian, his gaze was still on young Sparrow Hawk. Renbachian looked at this person in astonishment. What he said was pretty standard. I didn't expect that. I was muddle-headed from anger just now. Young Sparrow Hawk said softly and lowered her head. At this moment, everyone's gaze really made her a little afraid. Until now, she still didn't know how things turned out this way. She just felt that the words that Renbachian taught Du Changkong were really hateful, and wanted to teach him a lesson. However, the result was something that she didn't expect. Hong Xian pulled young Sparrow Hawk and said, "I will go with you to Her Majesty to apologize." Renbachian's words just now were very clear. Her Majesty wasn't far away, and it was impossible for her not to hear it. They had made a huge mistake, and had to apologize to Her Majesty. Young Sparrow Hawk was in tears. No matter what, she was still a young girl. This kind of situation made her a little flustered. Hong Xian pulled young Sparrow Hawk to look for Her Majesty to apologize. Along the way, everyone looked at them coldly, making them feel even more uncomfortable. In the distance, the young masters from the other three nations had already noticed that there seemed to be a conflict here. One of them was that mad dog. Because they couldn't get close, they could only hear a little of the conversation that was carried by the wind. However, they were watching the show from afar, thinking that it would be really satisfying if that mad dog was taught a lesson. What surprised them was that there were actually quite a number of aboriginals standing behind that mad dog. Were they supporting him? That mad dog actually had such a high status in Dayo? This was something that they didn't expect. Didn't Dayo always discriminate against foreigners? How could there be so many people standing on his side? The other side was obviously made up of a few aboriginals. As the two of them left, the rest also dispersed. No one bothered about Renbachian anymore. The few people who stood with Hong Xian just now also didn't look at him anymore. Just now, Renbachian was indeed in the right, but it didn't mean that others would like him. On the contrary, young Sparrow Hawk's mentality was actually the mentality of many people. After being exposed by Renbachian, it would be strange if they had a good impression of him. However, in that kind of situation just now, Renbachian had a righteous cause and the others had to stand on his side. Renbachian held the crossbow in one hand and the barbecued meat in the other. He was somewhat helpless. In fact, he didn't want things to turn out this way. But he had to do it at that time. He originally had a lot of good stuff. If anyone could take advantage of them, then he would have a lot of trouble in the future. Snatching a crossbow wasn't actually that important, but what about the other things? He carried the things back to the mountain-gazing bird, and placed the crossbow on the ground. Then he sat down and started to eat the cold barbecued meat. It didn't taste as good after it cooled down, but he was already very hungry. If he didn't eat now, he wouldn't have the strength to go up the mountain in the afternoon. From his angle, he could see Hong Xian and young Sparrow Hawk kneeling on one knee in front of the Empress's carriage. In fact, Renbachian quite liked the Dayo people kneeling on one knee. At least it was more comfortable than kneeling on both knees, right? If he were to kneel on both knees, he would feel a little uncomfortable. After all, he had been educated for decades that a man's knees were gold. Kneeling on one knee was no longer a problem. After finishing a piece of barbecued meat, he was almost full. He collapsed on the grass. To be honest, he was quite nervous just now, but now he could finally relax. As for whether those people would take revenge on him in the future, he didn't even want to think about it now. He would think about it after he came down from the mountain. After lying down for a while, someone appeared beside him and took the remaining piece of barbecued meat and started to eat it. Needless to say, it was Du Changkong, who was beaten like a dog just now. Brother, you are really amazing. Du Chongkong didn't forget to praise Renbachian as he ate. Even though he couldn't get up from the shock just now, he still saw what happened. He admired Renbachian very much. You are really a coward, being kicked around like a ball, Renbachian casually said. After hearing this, Du Chongkong's face turned black. Hong Xian has become more powerful after not seeing her for a year. This time around, not many people can beat her. Even though he was refuting, he felt a little powerless. What's the relationship between Hong Xian and Hong Wan? Renbachian remembered that both of them had the surname Hong, and couldn't help but ask. It seems like there is no relationship, Du Chongkong replied after thinking for a while. He really didn't know much about Hong Wan. However, Hong Xian is Sir Hong Wu's granddaughter. Who's Sir Hong Wu? Renbachian asked curiously. He's the second most powerful person in Dayo. I wonder when I can become that powerful. Du Chongkong had a look of longing on his face. Second in Dayo? Just slightly weaker than the Empress. Renbachian also felt that Hong Wu was indeed very powerful. Following which, he sat up abruptly. Hong Wu, the 9th most powerful person in the world? Yes, Sir Hong Wu is too powerful. Du Chongkong was still looking forward to it. However, Renbachian felt a toothache. Hong Wu was the 9th most powerful person in the world. He had offended the granddaughter of the 9th most powerful person in the world. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.